first meeting in 2020, CCWD, 9 o'clock on the money. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, call to order.
Pledge allegiance first, President.
Oh, okay. It's not here on this.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, I welcome you all and thank you for joining our party. Okay, item 1.
Director Redeman?
Here.
Director Thomas?
I'm here.
Director Davidson?
Here.
Director Cicada?
I'm here.
President Underhill?
Here.
Phone's off, please.
Okay. We'll go into public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board, and I see only one other public, and you'll be addressing us a little later, so. Number 3, consent agenda.
I'd like to pull a couple items, 3C and 3D for review.
3C and 3D.
Yes, ma'am.
Move for
Okay.
acceptance of 3A and 3B. Second.
Second. Call the roll, please.
Director Redeman?
Yes.
Director Thomas?
Yes.
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Director Cicada?
Yes.
President Underhill?
Yes. Okay. Cindy, couple of items on the claim summary.
Yes, let's start with that, and just a couple of things, and I'm just gonna, I'm gonna skip one because we are gonna be talking about the corp yard, right?
Yes.
I'm looking on page 3 and I see the deposit for the equipment storage building, so I imagine we could talk about that kind of stuff then. I'm kind of curious about, you know, the budget and where we are on that. So, the page 4, the Columbia Communications, we have the radios and the radio brackets, and it's because we have the new vehicles. Are we using
Oh, damn it, sorry.
new, you know, are we buying new equipment for these lease trucks for our communications, or can we use the old ones? And was this determined when we decided to go with the lease, which I still agree it's a good idea, but were these things taking effect when I'm looking at, you know, almost $7,000?
Yeah, so we had budgeted, we had planned, independent of the vehicle lease program, we had planned to buy some radios during this fiscal year to replace failing older radios in the trucks. But yes, to your other question of, most of the radios that we put into the new vehicles are repurposed.
Perfect.
So there was a few though that, due to the size of the fleet, were just aged out that we had to replace.
Very good. And, you know, I see a lot of the expenses on the fuel for the PSPS.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna prepare perhaps for the finance committee, something that says where we are to date, how much extra we spent because of that?
Yeah.
And present that at some
Yes.
point? Well, believe it or not, that's all I had on
Okay.
that consent agenda.
Any other items?
Yeah, nobody else.
Russ?
I'm done with the secretarial fund, but I do want to discuss the policy that's in the consent agenda.
Okay, well, we're going
Yeah.
to, we're still on the claim
Okay.
summary, okay?
3C, if no one else has any other questions on 3C, I'll move for acceptance.
No,
of
I have a
3C.
couple of
Oh, okay.
questions. Okay, on page number 2, we have the infamous Assessment District 604, and I've been hearing 604 for years. Are we almost at the end? Because wasn't this property that was being sold that we had to do special things with?
Where,
Which item are you on?
Page number 2,
Burke
Burke, Williams, and Sorensen.
So we actually have a detailed discussion of that on the engineering committee agenda for next week. Hard to answer that question with a yes or a no as to whether or not we're almost at the end. But we are, we're doing what we can to wrap it up.
We're no longer taking any payments in, are we?
I don't believe
I
we're
don't believe the
taking-
assessment's still.
No, I don't think we're taking any payments in.
But we're spending money?
We still give credits for properties in the district. No, I mean, I don't think we're not building any new infrastructure.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Where's this, what item is it that you're looking at?
About a
Right
third of the way
One,
down.
It's the,
page 2, about a third of the way down, Burke,
Burke
Williams, and
Williams.
Sorensen.
So that's a law firm, I assume?
Yeah,
for $1,200.
must be, it must be some sort of bond council question. I have to go back and look at, see what we used them for.
Okay,
Yeah,
and-
I believe that we should be pretty well done with that. I think it was a 20-year deal. I thought it expired a while back, so it is kind of curious that we're still expending
Yeah, well,
cash,
I'll-
because all that assessment was supposed to be a pass-through. Even our expenses were supposed to be passed through to bondholders.
Right, I'll report back on that.
Yeah, so some of the kind of closeout things are that there's still some delinquencies in there, so trying to send out, kind of prejudgment letters.
Oh, okay.
And stuff like that.
okay. Back on page number 1, we do have $2,200 paid to Aflac, and just remind me that there is employee contribution to the Aflac?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
100% paid by the employee, right? for Aflac?
Correct, but I think there's still an administrative charge on some of the, I'd have to check with Stacy on that, but yeah, so the district would still have an administrative cost that's not passed on to the employees.
Okay. Page number 6, we have my favorite construction company, Mazingo. Is this a contract payment that we're making to them? Because they're not gonna get started again until spring, and so I would just like to know why we're paying them
So
$760,000.
that was for a lot of materials that they have on site, and we verified the materials are there. So it was for purchase of, it's mostly pipeline, that they had already staged. So it was, we looked at it and determined it was an appropriate contract.
It was
payment.
a legitimate, okay.
Do you know offhand what's been spent to date on that project and versus how much we owe them to finish it?
Off the top of my head, I think we're somewhere around,
Actually, a third.
I wanna say 4 million that we've spent.
Yeah.
And what was the total project?
And the total project, the total contract is, I think, 7.4.
Seven.
Okay,
Yeah,
So we're still
yeah.
good.
So about half?
Yeah, we should be a little more than half, because most of the material is on site. So it should be a little bit more than half.
Is that all your questions?
Do you have,
I have just one, and Damon, I remember when you showed us pictures of the excavator kind of expediting the placement of the pumps at Copper Cove water source. That, I was pleased to see that, but I'm surprised that it cost $10,000 for Sutton to deliver and to rent us an excavator. Is that usual and customary for a couple of days of excavator rental to be $10,000?
We had it there for quite some time, yeah, because we had to also dig the trench to feed all of the armored power cable for the whole conveyance, excuse me, of the pump. So it was a lot longer than just the few days when the divers were here, actually.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Scott?
Yeah, I've already made a motion for acceptance of,
I'll second.
this little,
Call the roll, please.
Director Bradwick?
yes.
Director Thomas?
Yes?
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Director Sepeda?
Yes.
President Kennedy?
Yes. Okay, 3D, amending the district's financial management policy. The 5.13 financial audit policy, Cindy.
There's a kind of a minor change if you're looking on page 1 in the red line part that she put that, they recommended. At the finance committee, I thought we discussed including the finance committee to be reviewing 3. We had talked about, you guys could go through and bring 3 to the finance committee that would ultimately make a recommendation to the board. And I
So-
still feel that would be a good.
The conversation was, so when I brought this forward to the finance committee, it was specifically on 51333 and only that section, specifically because kind of statewide, all agencies are having a difficult time getting CPA firms. And so we're coming up to where we're about having to go out for a bid for services again. And statistically, it's probably pretty likely that the same firm that we're engaged with is going to be the
And
firm that responds. And so that was the finite reason for this. The conversation that happened at the finance committee is Vicki Mills came forward and said, hey, I thought that there was a discussion a year ago that staff was directed to bring back to the board a change for 34 that would change it from staff and the general manager to review the qualifications of prospective firms to include the board of directors or the finance committee. So the conversation at that point was you wanted to potentially table this change for 33 and bring it back and have that conversation. And what my recommendation was, let's have those separate conversations because we're kind of under the gun right now because we are at the end of our contract with our current
I
firm.
remember that now.
And so I said, but what we could do is we could go back and research because I wasn't here when that conversation happened back in 2018. And I can go back and look at the minutes and see what the conversation was. And then we can have that conversation at the finance committee at a later date. So just so you're aware, I did do that. And the finance committee meeting in November of 2018, it again was Vicki Mills. It wasn't the finance committee who asked to be part of the review process. It was Vicki Mills who had suggested that the board be reviewing and that the board be involved in the selection of the CPA firm. And the finance committee did not make any recommendation or direction to staff to bring it back. So that's why it never came back.
So can we bring it back to the finance committee next meeting? And go
Yes.
about that? I'd like to review it.
Sure.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Because there would have to be, quite a bit of education as far as the board is concerned about all of the potential firms that are out there. And we'd have to, and so that's just part of the process we'd have to
Well,
have,
I
yeah.
think the finance committee, looking at least 3 of their selections, if we get 3, we don't know.
Right, yeah.
But at least running it by us first. so
Oh,
we
yeah,
can-
no,
yeah.
absolutely, yeah, no, that's fine, uh-huh.
And from staff's perspective, and I'm still not, I am probably pretty hesitant on suggesting that the finance committee or the board actually be involved in the physical review and selection for qualifications of a CPA firm, because that generally is just not that's not the background of.
Well, however, remember, the board does make the policy.
Correct.
You make your recommendations, but what would be so wrong with having the staff pick X amount and say, here's who we recommended, and let us review so we can compare, oh, well, this one said this, you're recommending this one, just so we can get an idea that, the right decision was made. In fact, even looking at today, we could have the opportunity, all I'm asking for is to include the finance committee first. You bring the recommendation to the finance committee, we could change that right now today, and then we don't even have to talk about it anymore until you're ready to do it. I mean, we could make another agenda item for the finance committee, but we could easily change 34 to include the finance staff and general manager who will review the qualifications, present to the finance committee, which will recommend what goes to the board. or we can do it in finance committee.
Okay. Again, you know, I'm saying education of the finance committee, your
I'm
background.
pretty educated on
Yeah,
that.
yeah, your background is perfect. That's why I think you should be on the finance committee.
I agree. Anyhow, whatever you guys want to
Yeah.
do, I mean, we could,
Well, you know, we can,
I'd recommend that you take 34 to the finance committee first and see what
Right.
and you guys hash it over in detail then, and then make a recommendation to us about this policy.
well, I'll make a motion to go ahead and approve the recommendation presented here today.
Second.
call roll.
Director Hartman?
Yes.
Director Thomas?
Yes.
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Escobedo?
Yes.
President Underwood?
Yes. Okay. A new business. 4A, the presentation of funding, ongoing retiree health obligations, other post-employment benefits, OPEB.
Okay, so, September 11th of 2019, you had received the GASB 75 interim evaluation report. And at that time, you had asked that the consultant that put that actuary together come and fill in some information for you on exactly what was included in there and kind of what the demographic looked like. And so that's exactly what we're doing today, which is just kind of an informational meeting for you. So Gary Klein from Nicolay Consulting, who put together the actuary for us, is here to answer any questions that you have. I also think it was important to make sure that the board is aware that, and I included this information in your packet, that, you know, we are currently funding our OPEB trust with PARS. And we were, you know, that whole adage, you know, you want to, you know, buy low, sell high. We came in at a very bad point of the market, which was very, very beneficial for us. So we, so, you know, I don't know if, you know, that was, everyone thought, you know, how bad the market was gonna get, but we've rode the entire upswing. So because of that, our current assets for the money that we put in there is just over $9 million. And our investment earnings to date is just under $3 million. So that's been a pretty, you know, pretty good ride. So the contributions that we've been making on an annual basis have really fluctuated anywhere between $500,000 to, close to $1 million that we did in 2013. But we've made a conscious decision to fund as we can that unfunded liability as opposed to a pay-as-you-go model. And that's put us in a really good position to help offset some of the sting on that unfunded liability. So Gary's here to answer any questions that you have concerning this. We do have the presentation that he's going to go over, and if you have any further questions for me, I'm happy to answer those as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay, so I didn't get introduced to this, but I guess it's the left is just gonna make it go forward. Okay. And I assume all of you have had a chance to look this over for coming into the meeting, so I just stop me if you have questions anytime during the presentation, and I'll just go right on through. Wait, which way do I go? This one? This is the left is right, but I'm left-handed, so I imagine things are usually left. But okay, so I'll start with an overview and an introduction, get into the actual valuation results, whose main purpose is to come up with the cost of the plan, and so there's plan liabilities and on both an accounting basis and a funding basis. The key actuarial value assumptions will be, at the end, I'll talk about this thing called the implicit subsidy, which is relatively new in 2015 in terms of the concept. and a liability, and a little confusing, but for the year, there's, and then we'll get to questions. There's time at the end for Q&A. And so the first slide was a little bit about our firm. It's actually been in the business for 20 years and does a lot in pension plans in the nonprofit sector. Maybe a slice of it is governmental, but a lot of it is church plans and other nonprofits. The retiree medical group is actually, that does have over 100 clients, 120 or so. It fluctuates, but there's that. Those clients have been, that practice has been about 15 years, and I've come into the group. I've worked in the corporate sector in global actuarial firms. Now I moved into the government sector in this company, and I took it over about 3-4 years ago, and getting up to speed on. I dabbled in government, and now I'm 100% in it. And there's 3 other senior actuaries besides me, and we've been working with Calavera since 2011. And a little bit profile about you Calaveras. There's 47 retirees, 65 active employees. Of those active employees, over half of them are over age 50 and could retire if they wanted to and collect benefits under this plan. And an interesting thing about the plan is, unlike a pension, it's not really reduced as long as you have 20 years of service at retirement, which a lot of people do by age 50. It's not really reduced for early retirement. It just, you get more annual payments starting at 50 than if you retired at 65. And so that our assumption of when people retire is pretty important. Here, the statistics here are all assuming people retired at the first retirement age, which is 50, unless you're a PEPRA employee, which is hired after 2013, and that's 52, and most people don't retire that early. They usually stay on much later, but you could have 10% more retiring in 5 years and eligible to retire in 5 years, and 20% in the next 5 years. So literally 80% of your active population within the next 10 years are 50 and older. So this cash flow demand, this is why you're pre-funding it, because the cash flow is going to go, when people retire, you're going to start having the bills coming in, and it'd be nice to have those reserves set aside to help pay for them. Moving on, what is OPEB? It's not pension, it's retiree medical. Acts like a pension, and it's tax-free to the employee, as opposed to, it's not a taxable benefit when it's a pension is, but so it has an advantage as a benefit you provide retirees. And what I deal with is try to project whatever the costs are going to be and come up with present values of that, and that's the liability. So, the accounting requirements started around 2006 for GASB 45. In the past, there was no real requirement to put these promises, the liabilities associated with these promises to your employees on your books. So you could promise people, I'll cover you in retirement and your medical costs, but there's no presence of that on your balance sheet until somebody retires and you actually incur a cost, which isn't a great way to run a business. You really want to allocate the costs of an employee and their services over the time period that you're receiving the benefits of their productivity. And so that's what GASB 43 and 45 started to do. 43 is like the trust's financial statements, because it's employee money, it's not employer money. Once you stick it in a trust that's recognizable on your financial statements, under GASB 45 or 75 now, then it has to be an irrevocable trust where you stick it in there and it could only be used for covering benefit payments for retiree medical. At that point, it becomes employee money. And so 43 and now 74 is an update that started in 2017, sort of a revised standard from GASB. Those are both audit of the assets, making sure that the money is being used and accounted for the way a fiduciary would do it, invested properly. With 45 and now 75 in 2018, that's the employer's financial statements and the GASB standards that apply. And in 45, the interesting thing was to ease governmental entities' liabilities onto the balance sheet. It didn't initially stick you had, at that time, you had the plan. It had been around a while. There is an existing liability for past service, but, excuse me, it wasn't put on the balance sheet. Oh, you have a question?
Yeah, just for clarification of this slide, who creates 43, 45, 74? Where do those rules come from? How are they established? And now we got to run our business using them.
So these are the Governmental Accounting Standards Board is a nonprofit entity. It's not really a governmental entity. It's a nonprofit entity, and these standards are set through the general accounting practices. It's GAAP accounting.
Are you required? Is everybody required to go, or is it just commonality that you follow these rules?
Right. GASB is applicable to all governmental entities. The Financial Accounting Standards Board and for corporates and non-governmental entities, and the Governmental Accounting Standards Board is for governmental entities. These are the rule-setting bodies, but they coordinate with entities like the Securities and Exchange Commission and other. A lot of them are staffed by accounting firms. They coordinate with the large accounting firms too. But
That answers it.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. And that the whole purpose of the whole counting is to try and bring transparency to cost, comparability from one employer to another employer, that they're using the same basis for measuring the cost, and so the evolution of these standards is along that theme. Under 43, they said, listen, or 45 for employers, they said, listen, we don't want to just do this pay-go. That's like a off-balance sheet liability. We want to eventually bring them on the balance sheet, but we're not going to do it right away, because if we did, the whole country bond rating would just go down, and your cost of borrowing would go way up. So they transitioned it. They said, what we'll do is we'll just make you amortize over 30 years your liability that exists at the time, plus any new accruals, new liabilities earned for services for 1 year, those would be expensed, the amortization payment plus that. So since it was doing that, 45 was also a funding method, because it took the liability and benefits that were being earned was a cost, and amortization of past liabilities was a cost. So that's it's not just an accounting expense, could be a pre-funding expense. 75 came along and put the liabilities right on the balance sheet. So I give a little more background on 75 here. I put the unfunded liability on the balance sheet. So one of the things about that is, of course, this happened in 2017, 18, and so that's only 12 years after 45 came out. 45 was slowly, over 30 years, putting your liability on the balance sheet. Halfway through, they say, oh, you don't get to amortize it anymore, you got to put the entire thing on. So anybody that started pre-funding back then, it was much easier transition to go from 45 to 75. But now, since there's no more amortization in your accounting expense calculation, the annual cost, it's no longer can be used as a measure of what you should contribute to a trust, because it's no longer amortizing past unfunded liability. So now that brought in a separate concept. But another thing it did is it lowered the discount rate. In GASB 45, they were setting the discount rate based on your internal rate of return, which theoretically is based off of treasuries or whatever you invest in, essentially 4% at the time it's being used. But I think most governmental employers' internal rates of return dropped since 2006-ish so they're lower, but nobody really changed it. And GASB 45 wasn't policed that much. 75, they're getting more. There's more scrutiny, and they're turning the screws a little bit tighter. So they indexed your liabilities no longer on your estimate of your internal rate of return, but long-term government bonds, a 20-year high-grade muni. And so now now the discount rates around 2 or 3.5%, bouncing in that neighborhood. And that, of course, increased the liabilities. And it also shortens the amortization period for gains and losses, or instead of being able to amortize it over upwards of 30 years now, you're amortizing it over your average future working lifetime of your existing workforce, which is more like 7 or 8 years. And asset gains and losses amortized over 5 years. So that means more volatility to the extent that you have a $15 or $16 million liability. You could gain or lose $1 million pretty easy. And amortizing that over 30 years, not that big of an impact, but over 7 or 5, it is. So I put I talked about a need to understand your investment, benefit, funding, accounting policies. These are your 4 levers for managing risks in this plan. Investment policy is whether you're investing all in bonds or are you getting into equities, and why. It's going to bring volatility but higher return. And it's one thing to do it when the plan is young or your trust is young, but it's another thing to do it after you finally got all your liabilities covered. And so fully funded with assets, if you're sitting there with a liability that's largely for a retiree group, and you have 15 million covering in assets covering 15 million in liability, why do you want to risk more return and the volatility? You might take a more conservative approach. Oh, what?
Is your company the one in charge of determining where the funds are invested?
Well, it's you with PARS. They work Yeah, they work in conjunction with an investment advisor, Andrew Brown, and I think it's US Bank.
Yeah.
And they offer 5 off-the-shelf funding policies, essentially, or accounting, investment mixes that you could choose from. And so with a range of allocation from like 50-50 bond equity to 75,
And so
25 or
ours
something
makes
like
that decision, or do we have an option?
No, you
as a
do.
Board? Okay.
You make it anytime, change it anytime.
So recently, I had a meeting with PARS, and that is one of the items that we do need to bring back to the Finance Committee, because we don't have an existing investment policy related to that OPEB trust. So I do think it's really important that have sunshine on it, because I don't want to be the one who said, oh, I decided we were going to go into, whatever. And so I do want more oversight on that, and just we're all on the same page. And if we all agree to go in a more moderate, higher risk or conservative, then we all understand what that means and what the implications of that would be. So that is a policy that we're working on right now, and so we'll be bringing that forward to the Finance Committee and probably adding a section to our finance policy so it covers specifically that trust.
I think that's very interesting that we don't have one. Because all bases I would have thought were covered, and so, we'll be eager to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before you continue, Gary, I feel like that this stuff is so confusing that I almost hate to reveal my lack of understanding by asking a question, but I'm going to try anyway. Okay. You said a few moments ago about a 7-year expectation of payments or a lifetime of an employee.
Average future working lifetime, right.
Okay. Now, is this the expectation of somebody that retires at 52, that we're only going to have a 7-year obligation to fund this health care? Because I think if that's true.
The average future working lifetime is a measure, like there's someone that's 52, when are they on average going to retire? Is it 7 years later?
Mm-hmm.
Then if your average age, I think, is more like around 45. So, but for the active employees, but the average future working lifetime it represents, if for example, it was 60, then the 52-year-old would be 8 years. This 59-year-old would be 1 year. The 60-year-old would be 0 years.
Mm-hmm.
But we actually, and the younger people would be longer. What it's really just saying is that we want from the accounting world this average future working lifetime. If you have not when you have gains and losses, it's associated with a refined estimate of past benefits earned. The liabilities associated with that. So, oopsie, we made a mistake, there's a loss. Or, whoa, we made a mistake, but it's a gain. Hey, so we were conservative. We get lots of them from all sources. Mortality different than assumed, withdrawal, termination of services earlier than assumed, or retirement or death, or interest rates, asset returns. There's so many sources of gains and losses, so many assumptions going into these calculations. We do not have the right number of the liability in the past. It's gonna be something different. That's just one of those old sayings. We have best estimates is what we produce.
Okay.
And so when you, in the accounting space, when you realize that you didn't put on your balance sheet of the right liability, there's some gain or loss, that they'll have you put it on in your income, through your income statement over a number of years. They use average future working lifetime
Okay,
for that period of amortization.
as we review these monthly expenditures, and you know, according to your documentation, we have 65 current employees, which last month cost us $105,000. We've got 47 retirees, which last month cost us $43,600. I'm not sure exactly how that got funded, whether it's a check coming out of this PARS reserve or whether it's cash that's going into the reserve, and you know, it's just a wash. One goes in, one goes out.
Right now, you pay all of your retiree benefit payments, monthly payments out of your general fund. And you don't pay anything out of the PARS account. You have a contribution requirement of $600,000 to $800,000 a year to the trust from our valuation. This is what we think you should contribute to fund this, get to a point where the plan is fully funded in the future. This is your funding policy. Now, you can satisfy that contribution by paying benefit payments outside of the trust. So you have about $500,000 in benefit payments each year, and you pay that from general assets. That's like contributing it to the trust and then taking it out again. So it counts as a contribution to the trust.
Okay, so you said that the annual obligation is about $800,000? Is that what I heard you say?
The obligation, the amount we've determined to get you to a fully funded status, it's around $600,000 to $800,000 a year. On our last funding valuation, we projected it over 3 years, and it was projected 3 years worth of funding contribution requirements. There is no requirement to fund OPEB. You can have an unfunded plan, but your cash flow would balloon and then sink. So this is really just a way to levelize it, and so yeah.
Well, I know that prior negotiations have resulted in having a higher age requirement to get the post-retirement benefits, and that's a help. But frankly, it concerns me as a responsible person on this board to make sure that we continue to have black ink rather than red ink. When I'm looking at 65 current and 47 retirees, people live longer. You know, at what point are we going to have more retirees than workers, and at what point are we going to be paying $100,000 a month for retirees and $45,000, or when is it going to be equal, or when is it going to? At what point is the contribution for retirees going to exceed what we're paying for workers? That's what I can't get my head around. And if I was
So just from a 50,000 foot level perspective, you had that baby boomer population, and now they're older. So a lot of the people you're drawing from at that time, if people retired or terminated from your organization, you were hiring from an aging population. So if you hire somebody age 45 or 50 or something, that vesting schedule would be really good, because it was only giving half the benefits, for example, to someone that left with only 10 years of service. And so but now you have millennials and Gen Xers, you had a younger population, and so you're going to, the retiree population eventually will die out and it'll stabilize, but with that baby boomer population, it's gonna take a while before, I mean, you're gonna see your retiree population grow, but then it's gonna stabilize, and we'll have what's called a stationary population with the demographics sort of stabilized. But until the last baby boomers are gone, in terms of they're dead, so in another 20 years or so or more,
Bertha,
30
really
years, you know,
enlightening conversation here.
well, he's talking. He's
Debt and death. Let's call it
He's
what it
talking
is.
about us.
So, but yeah, that's what's driving, that's one of the things that is driving.
Well, I know in your business that you have a tendency to take a guess and extend it to 10 places past the decimal point. So, and I appreciate the work that you do. But at some point, I would like to see the graph on that, you know, when is that, the retiree cost gonna start trending down? When is it gonna level off? When is it gonna continue to go up? Because as a person who is, I've signed on to watch the money here. And if this was a single proprietorship and I was in the leadership position, I would be scared out of my mind about that, the way that I see it going. So, does anybody else feel that way? I mean,
It is an unknown.
it is a very, very definite unknown. So, anyway, how do we get that information?
Well, I have a
Future
question.
forecast.
So we have this
They have a lot of data.
$9 million
A lot of data.
unfunded liability
data to
fund. And you made a comment that we make the actual cost payment out of the general fund, and that's like making a payment to the fund. Is there ever gonna be a point where we don't pull it out of the general fund and it comes from that, this unfunded liability account?
So there's two payments that are happening. We're actually physically paying health insurance for retirees, and those payments go to CalPERS. And then we're making a contribution to PARS, two totally separate, right? So the PARS payment is in essence to kind of help us stabilize against that huge liability. Those trust funds can only be used to pay for OPEB costs. So if we, so in essence, if we ran into an issue from a district-wide perspective, and we go, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, we've, hit another recession or whatever it is, and we can't make, we basically need a stopgap. So if we could save, $100,000 or whatever for retiree OPEB related expenses, we could literally pull money out of PARS and have that directed straight to PERS for those payments. But in addition, if we found ourselves where our demographic starts changing and we go, because you don't want to be overfunded either. You do not want to be overfunded. So if we found ourselves where we're kind of shifting our demographics and we're shifting our outcomes and that liability starts going down, we'd want to pull back from any future funding to that PARS trust. And we'd probably at that point want to stop using general assets to pay for OPEB costs and actually redirecting PARS directly to offset those costs.
And do we have a policy on when we review this to see if we're there?
No, so I think that's part of that whole investment policy, and I think that that's kind of the missing pieces that I'm seeing, where we don't really have, and our existing investment policy in our financial policy is really specific to our treasury, right? It doesn't have anything to do with these, kind of stabilization type trusts. So I think that's why I'm saying, I think we need a separate section that specifically addresses this, type of asset, because we want to make sure that, we don't overfund it. We want to make sure, what triggers that shift where we're going to use the resources to actually pay for costs, as opposed to we're just going to sit in there and let them ride, and when we're going to evaluate when we need to make a change from investment.
And then the documents that we have in front of us, can you give us an idea of how close we are to that possibility?
So,
are we still real far away, or any kind of an idea?
yeah, I think the actuary, what were we, 50?
What page, when we get there?
Let's see. Well, if you go to page 6 on that exhibit at the very bottom, and this is the 2018 and 2017. So obviously we've made additional contributions since that happened. But at the time, we were at 54% for 2018. So we're over 50% funded against our liability.
And you think that we'd want to be at 100%, or is there a number
Well,
like
the
80 or
basis of the
70?
actuary is,
Okay.
I would, yeah, as far as the funding goes, and the funding policy, now you're describing the funding policy, which is my area of expertise. And the funding policy, when funded status is kind of well-funded, overfunded. What happens if you think you're well-funded, so you stop contributing, and then all of a sudden, the market goes down 20%. Now you're underfunded by 20%, and you can't make that up unless the market bounces back. And University of California retirement system had a what is it, an $80 billion pension plan at the time. They funded it. Their funding policy was to get up to 150% funded. And then the markets, and they did. But then now they're at about 100 or a little bit under, and actually had to make professors start contributing because of all the downturns, the bubble burst, the mortgage, the banking crisis. And so, when in the market are you at 100% funded? Is it in a bubble, or is it at the lowest point? Is a concern. So, go ahead, you had a question?
I was going to say, I heard you say professors have to start contributing. Is that very common for employees to have to contribute to their post-employment benefits?
I was talking about their pension plan.
Oh.
And they weren't contributing, but they started to talk, and they were going to go on strike. What do you mean we have to contribute 1% or 2% to these pension benefits? We never had to in the past, but do retirees contribute to pension or retiree medical? Yes, absolutely. Because of the various reasons that have made these plans more expensive, including the baby boomer generation and all of a sudden a higher percentage of retirees. It's an issue with Social Security too. That you have more retirees than active employees, and it's a burden to carry that liability. So they moved with Pepper on the pension side to have employees contribute to 50% of the cost of benefits that they earn going forward. With medical, yes, absolutely. They've been having retirees pay. Some employers can reduce. You have options of how you split the cost. It's up to you. How do you set that?
Thank you.
I had a quick question, if that's okay with the board. Just in the funding level, I think we're collectively trying to get a sense of our health. And it sounds like in the example you gave, 150% wasn't enough to insulate from a market downturn. We're a little more than 50%. In your experience, where does that compare to other comparable agencies? I think there's some that aren't funding it at all. There's others that are probably ahead of us. Where do we stand on it?
You are probably in the middle of the pack, I would say. A lot of agency, and the thing that drives it is really when it comes down to it, and if you go outside of water agencies, which tend to have a bit more money than, say, school districts, you're doing well if you look at the overall population. I think given and another thing I point out about contributing benefit payments as well as paying a payment to the trust, that is like, okay, I'm telling you to get to a certain period of fully funded after a certain period, let's call it 20 years, you should contribute $600,000 to the trust. So you do, and then you pay benefit payments from another source. It's like double contributing. Now, what you're doing is saying, great, I don't want to take 20 years. I've got the ability to get there in 10, so let me double my contribution. you can stop if you want to, and just pay the contribution and start paying benefits from the trust. And then slow down how long it takes you to get to full funding. And that's one of the parts of the funding policy. You tell me the period over which you want to get this thing fully funded. I bake that into my actuarially determined contribution, and you could just start paying that. But right now, there was a policy set up to essentially pay benefit payments to, which is almost like double paying the contribution, to accelerate it. Why? Because you probably had the money and you wanted to take the liability down on your balance sheet.
Okay, with that said, Gary, Rebecca, this funding policy and what we're currently doing right now wasn't created on your watch. And now that you've had a chance to look at this, is this your recommendation as well? As to what we're doing and how we're handling this, or going forward, do you see changes?
Well, I don't have the crystal ball, so I don't really.
No.
But,
We didn't before either,
You
by the
don't?
way.
Right, but, he's correct. If you don't just compare water agencies to water agencies, but you stand back and you say, let's look at all, governmental agencies, special districts, everybody. There's a lot that don't fund at all. They just pay as you go. The county is pay as you go.
Which is gonna cause this.
It does this.
Okay.
Right? So 1 year you have this big liability, and the next year you don't.
Remember, that's why we created this, so we have that
And
stability.
so you have this stabilization.
Okay.
And you're in a position where you do have the funds to contribute to this trust, so that it gives you an option in the future, so that when, or if you don't, or your demographic completely changes, or the market, tanks, or whatever these kind of risks are that are out on the horizon that we just don't know at the moment, it gives you another option and an insulation, so that we're not basically having to strap further our operations in order to meet these needs for employees that we made a promise to that are no longer here. So it's a very, I was actually really excited to see that this had been done, because I was like, oh my gosh, because I was asking for the county to do this for years, and they're just now going to start for their pension. And so here, we've addressed a big portion of the pension UAL liability, and we've done a really good job at addressing a portion of this OPEB liability. So we've put ourselves in a really good position because we have the ability to do that. So it does insulate us from some of those risks. And I think it's just a matter of kind of bringing forward some additional policy to make sure that the finance committee and the board is aware what we're doing and why we're doing it, and kind of where the line is, and when we can pull back, and it just puts another option for us.
And where that line was a couple of years ago isn't necessarily where it's gonna be in 2 years from now.
Correct.
Right, okay. So we do need to get those baby boomers out of here, and then we need them to die, is what we've learned today.
We've started a program to encourage smoking among the older employees.
Smoking and
Yeah.
like lots of red meat and
Right. Okay.
butter.
Rebecca, before you step away, I mentioned the claim summary figures that we saw today. There's, according to Gary's 200 to 300,000 extra that gets paid into the trust fund. Where does that show up on the claim summary? I don't recall seeing that.
Well, so it's payroll. So what happens is, we've calculated out basically on the retiree health itself, that will come out of the claim summary. I think it comes out of the department.
There's health insurance shows
Yeah.
for retirees, there's dental and vision shows for retirees, and then down at the bottom, it shows the retiree medical reimbursements. That's all the pay-as-you-go.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about the PARS trust contribution though?
Yeah, where's that?
We pay that one annually.
Annual lump sum, yeah.
Usually February or March, and it shows on the claim summary as well.
And that's,
That makes sense.
as he indicated, it might be $200,000 or $300,000 annually? Is that
No,
just-
the OPAB payment to PARS is, could be 600, 800, yeah.
But I got the impression that the $43,600 monthly could be used as a credit, or is used as a credit toward that $800,000 liability.
On paper, it can be used as an offset to the 800, but so that's why he's saying we're in essence, we're double paying. So we're paying the 43,000 and we're, per month, and then we're paying this 800,000 or 600,000. And the reason we're doing that is to shorten that fully funded timeline.
Okay. This is probably more a question for Gary, but just so I can get my head around this thing, is that 800,000 extra payment, could it be simplified by saying that is the cost of providing enough insurance in the future to cover existing employees?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Existing employees, and if all retirees are not fully funded yet, current retirees as well.
Yeah, but we're all old. Which, to clarify,
Some of us.
we
Some of
don't
us.
get any of this anyway, but,
Well, if you pay the 40,000 a month or something for your current premium, you're gonna have them 10 years from now.
Yeah.
If you set some money aside in a trust and get 7% return on it, you'll use investment earnings plus that contribution to pay your premiums in the future. So you'll get the benefit of the trust as a retiree.
all right. So I just want to make sure I have a firm understanding of this, that if, under dire circumstances, like if we have a PSPS that lasts a month, and we have, instead of 200,000, we've got 1,200,000 that we got to cover, and we've got to scramble to make ends meet, we could collectively say, let's set aside that 800,000 this year to help keep the doors open.
Correct.
We can do that,
We can actively choose to not fund the PARS for that year or for that 2 year. We can take basically a hiatus for funding that. In addition to that, you could say, for 1 year, we're gonna forego paying the $43,000 a month out of general assets. And we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna pull the $43,000 a month out of our existing PARS trust.
Okay.
So there's multiple options to doing that, and that's why I think it's important that we have a policy that we can have that dialogue.
And we wouldn't have to worry about replacing that we borrowed?
Well,
Eventually,
you're not
Perhaps.
borrowing it, you're using your using your assets. But the worry is now you're pushing yourself under that 50%. So, and you're elongating how long it's gonna take you in order to get to that fully funded status. again.
So that'll be a very serious decision to make, or, yeah.
Yeah, that's not a
You know,
light.
it might be a good idea, if we're bringing this in the finance committee, to have some of the board members express their concerns to you and I. So when we're talking with Rebecca, we can say, here's some concerns, to make sure we include in the policy.
Yeah. So, I mean, the sky probably needs to be falling before you wanna do something like that, but
Right.
yeah.
Well, but it gives me some degree of comfort to know that that's available if absolutely needed, so that's good. I
Okay.
appreciate that knowledge.
How else did we want to, I mean, where are you in your presentation to us?
Okay, yeah, that whole funding policy is sort of beyond the scope of this presentation. And so, yeah, I would take it out and discuss it, whether or not it takes the sky falling or something else it's hard to judge without a thorough conversation on the topic. And so, it's a need, so it'll happen. Sure, so I'll move on to, we've already talked a little bit about this actuarially determined contribution and how GASB 45 used to calculate it, but now it's a separate calculation, since 75 is not a funding method anymore. The results were showing that you have this present value future benefits, and the difference between that and your total OPEB liability, I'm not sure if that was clear. Any questions on that? It's really just what have people earned to date versus what are people going to earn over their entire career for your existing population and the plan, current actives and retirees. So the two numbers, the retirees, present value future benefits, is the same as total OPEB liability because it's all been accrued already. Whereas the actives, there's about 3 million out of 10 million still to be accrued, since in the bottom, total OPEB liability active is about 7.5 million, whereas up above it's almost 10.5 million. And here we were comparing the assets to the liability, and you're about 50% funded. I show below the calculation of what the contribution has been. It was 747,000. Oh, it does, but it doesn't show up on the TV. But it's right about here on the right-hand column, 747, and on the left-hand column, it's 855. That's your total contribution. So people are earning benefits. It's costing you about 300 to 400,000 just for 1 year of service of people earning benefits towards medical. If you had a really young staff, that'd be a much smaller number. If you have an older staff, it's a large number. Moving on. So this is actually an accounting of the liability and the assets from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. It shows up in our report. You can see the liability was 13 million, assets 6.5. And the liability goes up by the accrual of new benefits, and here it's 350,000 because it doesn't include interest, whereas on the other slide it did include interest for the year. But interest on the liabilities, right? You're discounting a future cash flow to today, and the liability is going to grow just because you're 1 year closer to paying those cash flows. So you get 1 year less of a discount rate. So interest at 7% on $13 million is, what is that, about $100,000, or I mean $1 million for that's the 922 in the middle. There was not much in terms of gains and losses because we actually didn't update the census and make any assumption changes, but when we do that, there are usually several, and you can get gains and losses because we do valuations once every 2 years. GASB allows this, so to save costs, because it's kind of expensive to engage us to grab your census, review all the assumptions, and do all the calculations to create these reports. If we could just roll the forward liabilities by hand, assuming that would just basically assume no gain or loss. This is going to show up a little bit of gain or loss because benefit payments were different than assumed. Let's see. Any questions on this? Reconciliation, moving forward to the implicit subsidy. I wanted to cover this a little bit because this is really a liability that's, payments are coming from a different source than contributions or the $40,000 you pay monthly for retiree premiums. You're getting a contribution towards your retiree costs from someplace else, and it's your active employee costs. The active and pre-Medicare retirees, they both pay a single premium calculated by the insurers and given to you by for you participating in the CalPERS plan, so the CalPERS in that system. It's the same rate whether you're old or whether you're young, but actual claims are going to vary, and older people generally cost more. And so there's a subsidy being passed from the group that's sort of paying too much cost in a premium versus a group that's paying too little costs because their claims are much higher than that premium on average. And that's this chart here, that solid black line going up and down in the middle there is age 65. That's when Medicare kicks in for now. They could change that law and make it 67 or 70, but right now it's 65, and so Medicare kicks in, and those curves and the flat blue lines, those are the flat blue lines are the premiums. It doesn't matter if you're 25 or 60. It's going to be around, at the time this chart was created, on average about almost $8,000. And a young person may not even go to the doctor for the whole couple of years, maybe a few years. Like I've shied away from doctors, but I was always pretty healthy, and so I didn't need to go. But I'm paying $8,000 a year, whereas a older person, a retiree, for example, is going to be going to the doctor several times a year, perhaps, and or taking medication daily. And so those are all medical costs, and so the active employees through their premiums are paying this implicit subsidy to retirees by everybody paying the same amount. This shows what the curves look like on pre-Medicare costs versus post-Medicare costs are pretty flat. And so any questions here? The reason I wanted to highlight it is because it's $2 million of the liability that we're showing for you as retirees. And you're actually funding it through your active premiums, which I don't know what your annual active healthcare costs are, $1 million or 800,000, something. It's a big number, and so a portion of it is going to essentially fund claims for retirees through this process. And the accounting world wants us to shift this liability and the acknowledgement of this liability back to retirees, and then you'll take part of your active employee annual premium costs and shift that and call it part of your contributions for the year. So part of what I call a contribution for retirees is coming from your general trust, yes, but a piece of it is actually covering active premiums, not retiree premiums, just so you know. That's what's happening. And so I don't know if I have to describe, you guys are interested to hear about the plan of benefits, but there's 3 inputs to calculating these liabilities. The plan provisions, the assumptions, and the census. So whenever we give you what the liabilities are, we talk a little bit about the plan provisions. Namely, you're covering, you cover basically, you could say all of the retiree medical costs for participants that meet this 20-year service requirement. You're covering it not just for the employee, but for the employee's spouse. And they have, there's actually 4 tiers. And this is the vesting provision where a portion of the benefits paid to people, if they leave your employee before 10 years of service, they get nothing. If they leave, so if you hire somebody that's 60 and they only work to 65, they get nothing from you. But if they work to 20 years, you'll pay 100% of the cost. At 10 years, it's 50% of the cost, and it's graded percentage. These are the tiers, and they kind of segregated what the how many actives and retirees are in each of these tiers, and what the dates that's applicable for the tiers. So hired before 2001. Down below it shows what are the key points about the plan provisions. Tier 1 people, you could retire earliest at 50 and 10, and your medical cap, you get basically paid up to the PERS choice plan, and it's about roughly $10,000 per year pre-65, $4,000 post-65, and you get employee and spouse coverage. And you also get dental and vision coverage. That's not a big number. The tier 2 group, same 50 and 10, but it's 9 and 9 is the amount. But these all of a sudden have that vesting. That's a little on that 9 and 9. You see K with a 2. That 2 is referencing that vesting schedule. So you traded off paying a little bit more for post 65. But there's now subject to vesting, and some people will get even pre and post 65 cut back. Moving on. So any questions here? Okay. This is the key assumptions, and I did want to take a second to talk about this, in that you're using a 7% discount rate on your liability. So assets have to earn 7%. And we talk about the plan being 50% funded. Are markets high right now? Are people predicting that they're going to come down? Or are they going to go up 7% per year for the next 30 years or 40 years that is the lifetime of your cash flows that you're funding for? Well, I don't know, but it could be lower. It could be 6%. Whatever you use as this discount rate, it's like a hurdle rate for your assets to achieve that return. And so to the extent that they can't get over that hurdle because you set it too high, you're going to end up having to come up with cash later on. So you lower your risk by lowering that rate. And it's supposed to be your estimate of long-term rate of return on assets. So I think with when I talked to Andrew Brown, the investment advisor at US Bank for PARS, all these off-the-shelf funds, he gave me his expectation of rates of return for all the different mixes. I think yours is the moderator or something. It was around 6.97 at the time. That was 4 years ago. They haven't updated their estimates since then. But if you follow JP Morgan's, annually they publish capital market assumptions. And they've been coming down a bit, maybe 50 basis points lower. So anyways, that can have a material effect on your costs, as well as the trend rates, which is the next item. I'm assuming 8% roughly, and you're getting some gains because they didn't go up on average premiums 8% last year. And ultimately, there's this, for post 65, by the way, they didn't go up 5%, they went up a little less. And with this, that's the initial trend rate. That's the rate they're going to go up from 1 year to the next, this year to next year. The ultimate trend rate is we grade these assumptions down over time, and in 10, 15 years, it'll be 5%, I'm assuming, per year, that is. And so, these are, if I were to, I've been setting these, and I'm probably shaded 50 basis points higher, because the interesting thing is I follow this discount rate. So to the extent that I'm using a discount rate, because my plan sponsor is saying they think they're gonna get 7% return, then there's volatility in that, and they may. So I'm going to get a little bit higher on my trend rates, and because both have inflation as a component, I could move my trend rates with your changes in the discount rate. And so the net impact of changes to any one of these assumptions in your valuations doesn't have the same kind of impact it does on the pension side, where you change the discount rate, but you don't have a healthcare cost trend rate to also change to offset it. And this chart shows you the impact of changing one of them. So you change the discount rate by 1% from 7 to 6%, and all of a sudden your liability goes up by $2 million. That's the, whoops, I'm sorry. That's this middle column. I'm going up and down that middle column. That's the dollar change in your liability. And the NOL is your net OPEB liability. That's your liability minus the assets, so it's 50% funded, so it's 50% of your liability, essentially. And so that's how GASB 75 wants you to display this chart. So yeah, $2 million is a big number. It's 30% just if you change your discount, your assumption of long-term returns. So, but you have a 6% return. I would say that that's easily achievable over the long term, over 40, 50 years, because it's more than that has been achieved in the past. So, but 7%, I don't say easy anymore. I say it's achievable. And 8%, I'd say, well, okay, that's a bit risky. But so that's kind of where but if you talk over the next 10 years or 5 years, the asset advisors are suggesting things around 5% or less, 4%, on a fund invested in, such as you, that's a mixture of equities and stock. Just because markets are high and they expect low returns in the near future. So let's see, the trend rates have a 1% change has almost an identical impact, but the opposite way. A 1% increase in the trend rate will increase your liability. A decrease in the trend rate will reduce your liability by 25%. So it offset there is some inherent stability in OPEB retirement plans and the measurement of liabilities when you pair these two assumptions together and consider them moving in a somewhat similar fashion because they're both based on inflation. And that's where I come in. I try and help smooth the costs here by acknowledging this and understanding it. Okay, so that's sort of what I had to bring to you today. I appreciate your time. Any questions?
I want to say thank you. It was really informative.
It was informative. You broke it down very nicely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Still a lot of
You did.
confusing stuff in there,
Delivered
but.
it nicely. That's good.
Thank you so much. Can we take a 5-minute break, please?
So Cindy, have you experienced any prosperity?
Give him a break, he's old, he moves
Okay.
slow.
The board president shall appoint and publicly announce the members of standing committees for the ensuing year. The president may also create or eliminate any committee and in her discretion at this time. The board elects the members to serve on the JPIAs, of which the district is a member. So you have my appointments. I asked for everybody to submit what preference they had, and I tried to do that. And so what we're going to be doing is looking at what it is. The board engineering, Davidson and Thomas, alternate Cicada finance, Underhill and Cicada, alternate Thomas, legislative legal affairs, Davidson and Ratterman, alternate Thomas. And so what we're going to do is go to, if you have no problem with your committee assignment, we'll go on to JPIA, or Joint Powers Authority.
We have to vote on each one of these, right? Or can we just vote on it as a slate?
If you like the slate, you can vote on the slate, or do them individually.
Does anybody have any issues with the slate? I'm content with the Upper McCollum
Everybody happy
watershed.
with it?
I have no problem with this slate. Good job,
Good job.
President Underhill.
Oh, okay, thank you so
I
much.
move for acceptance of the slate of JPA assignments.
I second that.
And board committees, right? Or do we?
Well, the board committees is not, we don't have to vote on that, that's her discretion.
Yeah, that's,
Oh.
Okay, and
Well, then I'll
I have,
second.
and I'll have a second.
I reserve.
Okay.
Call the roll?
Director Ratterman?
Yes.
Director Thomas?
Yes.
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Director Cicada?
Yes.
President Underhill?
Yes. Okay. Going to 4C,
One thing
Who's
changed.
our GM?
information regarding grant funding for the West Point and Wilseyville wastewater facilities consolidation project. And that's Mr. Joel Metzger and Charles Palmer.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I'm very pleased to share some information with you about a $4.75 million grant, which we received paperwork from the state to accept, and we're just ready to sign it. But before we do, we wanted to make sure that the board was updated on this project and had an understanding of what it involves and what the next steps will be. So I'm just going to run through this at a high level with all of you. And then we have Charles Palmer here for any technical questions that you have about the configuration of the plants. If you'd like, he'll be available as well. So this project consists of consolidating the West Point wastewater treatment plant and the Wilseyville wastewater treatment plant. They are located very close together up there off of Associated Office Road, right by Highway 26. And so it really makes sense to consolidate these two plants. It is a small service area, so we only have 167 customers in West Point and 29 in Wilseyville, which mainly consists of the old Wilseyville camp, which was an old housing development for the timber company that operated up there. The cost of this project is estimated at $4.75 million, and the funding is 100% grant funded, which is just absolutely incredible to bring that much of an investment in without having to have a local match from CCWD. And the reason that it's 100% grant funded is because of the severely disadvantaged status of the West Point and Wilseyville communities. So the timeline for this project is we have until the 11th of this month to sign and agree to the terms. And then we have until January 1st, 2024 to get this done. Here's an aerial view of the project. So on your left-hand side is the West Point plant. You can see the storage ponds for the treated effluent. The red line represents the force main that will be constructed between the Wilseyville plant and West Point. And if you follow that red line over, you can see the smaller storage pond for the Wilseyville plant, and then the little Wilseyville camp on Blagan Boulevard up above it there. So that's the connection that we're going to make as part of this project. For a little bit more details on what's actually going to happen, it's 4,000 feet of force main from Wilseyville to West Point. We're going to construct another line in the same trench that comes back from the West Point plant back to Wilseyville. So one's going to go from right to left, and the other one's going to go from left to right. And that's going to bring treated effluent back up to a rehabbed Wilseyville pond so we can have additional storage of treated effluent. That's one of the alternatives that we're considering. That's what we're leaning toward right now. Additionally, we're going to improve the West Point treated effluent storage ponds. So those are those two big ponds on the bottom left. They currently need to be cleaned out. A new liner needs to be put in. And we need to try to prevent I&I from getting in there because we're having issues right now with too much storm water getting in there, and we're not able to dispose of the water during the winter months. And so we're getting in trouble with the state board on the levels.
This system is a Title 22, a second disinfectant?
So this is a secondary treatment. It's a sand filter, and it's disposed of using 40 acres of spray fields. That's West Point. Wilseyville is smaller. I think it's about 15 acre-feet pond, and that takes full raw sewage, and it gets dumped into that pond and aerated, and then it basically just through evaporation and leaching out of the bottom of the pond disposes of the water and tends to stay just about level. There is a small spray field there as well, but it hasn't been necessary to use that spray field in our memory.
Could you elaborate on why you feel like it's necessary or appropriate to run a pipeline back down to keep that pond full?
So there are two alternatives that were considered for that, and I'm just telling the board what I think is going to happen. Another alternative would be to fill that pond in and cover it up and return the slope to its natural condition and hydroseed it, and abandon the spray field in those facilities, and then just bring everything down and treat it at West Point. And so we had a preliminary meeting on this earlier this week, and we're going to make sure that operations is in close communication with engineering, and the actual operators can express what they think would be best for these facilities, and then engineering can move forward with the planning process. So we haven't 100% landed on how that's going to work.
So the treated water from the West Point, how much can that hold, and has the district had any problems with winter weather overflowing? So we could use the Wilseyville's additional storage in that case.
So those ponds hold between 20 and 40 acre feet. One's a little larger than the other. And the Wilseyville pond, I think, is around 15 or 20 acre feet. So it would be some extra storage. But for what I was told from operations, the main problem is that we can't discharge the water in the spray fields during the winter months. I think it's end of October, we can't discharge all the way until April. And if we could get a new permit as part of consolidating these plants, instead of having two permits and having to pay fees on all that, we'll consolidate it into one and we'll save permitting fees. And if we could get a permit that allowed us to discharge during the winter months on days where it's sunny and warm and it wouldn't, get picked up by rain and washed into nearby creeks, we may not have nearly as much of a problem with these ponds filling up and getting above their freeboard.
And you're certain that the permit shows that it's no spray field discharge from those months, or is it just 24 hours before and 24 after a rain event?
The current permit is 0 discharge allowed during winter months, and there have been times when we're forced to discharge during the winter months because otherwise we're going to have those ponds get too full, and then that results in a violation.
MSD thought that they had that exact same issue, and just the last couple of years we confirmed that we do not. We just have to follow the 24 before and 24 after.
Got it.
And I'm wondering if we could just change that permit, if that's helpful here or there, whatever.
I believe that would be the intent, is to get a permit that has more ability to spray during winter months.
One of the things we were attempting to establish, we've been working on this project for years, 4 or 5 years at least, and I think that you take that in your summary here. But
right.
One of the main things that seems like we were talking about initially was to get rid of the 2 permits, the having to deal with that. And so does that bring in, if you do decide, if staff does decide to bring that pipe back down to Wilseyville, will that require that we still maintain two permits and have 2 different Okay.
So-
It's just additional storage down there for the one permit at
Right.
West Point.
Exactly. So yeah, so it does seem like the facilities will still kind of be far apart, but what we'll do is we'll consolidate them into one permit and it will just be a bigger footprint.
Okay.
So no matter which way we go, it'll just be one.
Is that a problem?
Nope.
You anticipating problems?
No, the regional board doesn't like either of the plants. They have problems with both of them. And they've told us we need to upgrade these. And that's why we got the planning grant 4 or 5 years ago. And that's why we've gotten this grant, because of the disadvantaged community.
Because they don't like it.
They see that we need to improve the facilities and to come into compliance.
Well,
with
they probably
current-
know our facilities a lot better than we do, so we should pay attention.
So another,
Just out of curiosity, you talked about going down to West Point, and somebody else said going down to Wilseyville. What's the differential topographically?
I don't know the elevation change between the Wilseyville plant and West Point. I don't think they're too far different, just based on my memory of the way that the road goes. But Charles may have more information on that.
Okay.
Is Charles?
Yeah, it's pretty flat. There's not a significant difference in elevation there.
Okay.
Did we do any research to see if we could treat the water to be used for fire mitigation? Because as it is right now, you can't. But I wonder what it would take to treat it, to get it to that position for out there. Or would it even be enough water for fire mitigation?
Yeah, I don't know if we've looked at that, but that is something that as we move into planning over the next few months, we could definitely take a look at and see if that makes sense, if we could get it to where it could be used for that purpose. So another one of the benefits of this project is we will be able to put in a septic receiving facility. So the way the West Point system works is everyone has a septic tank and their sewage goes into that. And then we do what's called a step system. So we just take the liquid off the top of those septic tanks, and that's what's pumped in through force mains to the West Point plant. And that's pretty easy to treat because it's just the liquid. There aren't solids in there. The Wilseyville plant is all of the sewage dumps, solids and liquids, dumps into that pond, and then it's aerated. So that, that's a much more difficult mix to treat than just the liquid. And so what we're going to need to do is either install a large community septic tank for Wilseyville that's near the existing pond, or another alternative is to actually bring all those solids down to the plant itself and put the large septic receiving facility there. And then we also take the pumped septic tanks from West Point. We currently dump those solids into the Wilseyville pond. So we're going to need to have a new place to dump those solids. And so we may want to locate that at the West Point plant so it's kind of a little bit closer and easier to use. And then we'll need to treat those solids with an aerator basin of some kind. And we're going to need to separate the liquid from the solids so we can take the liquid and put it through the sand filter, which is currently what treats the West Point liquids. And then we're going to need to have a belt press of some kind to squeeze the water out of those solids. And then we're also going to need to construct some sort of a drying facility. So it may look like a large greenhouse where we can put the sludge and get the rest of the water out of that. And then maybe could use that for some kind of product that could be sold or given away. Right now, we truck most of our sludge very, very far away in order to dump it because we can't dump it locally.
Joel, during the planning grant activities, did you come up with several alternatives, and this is one of those, or are you going to use this construction grant to still finish the design? I mean, did DWR accept it without knowing exactly what we're going to do?
So we did give them pretty clear information in our application of what we're going to do, but there is some flexibility in how we actually execute the final. And so that's where the planning comes in. That's the first thing we're going to do: planning, design, and then construction. And so we will have some leeway, but we can't just completely change the project to something that isn't anything close to the grant application. And then the final thing is the SCADA system. Oh, yes.
Oh, excuse me, you were talking about the construction, and that's where item number 6 comes. You're going to construct the sludge dewatering facility? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so that's like the belt press where we push those solids and get the liquid out, and then we put the solids that come out of the belt press that still have some moisture in them into this drying facility, and then they'll be able to dry, and then we can get them off site from there. And so finally, the SCADA system improvement. So this is the way we can automatically control facilities remotely. It currently is not equipped with SCADA, the West Point plant. And so we'll be able to install SCADA systems and have much more automated control and alerts if something goes wrong. So that's going to be a huge improvement to the West Point plant as well. So that's, again, a high-level overview of what is in the grant application. And this just shows you a little bit more about where things will be located in terms of the steppage receiving, the effluent storage ponds, the force mains, and then where the pump stations are going to be. I did want to give you a little history on why it's taken so long to get this grant approved. So in 2013, we got the planning grant. In 2014, we did submit the grant, and it was denied by the state board because we didn't have enough sewer revenue coming in on the operations side. So unfortunately, we kind of qualified in every other way except that we didn't meet the financial requirements. So it got put on hold, and then in 2018, the board passed a rate increase. And that showed that over the next 5 years, the sewer revenues were going to increase incrementally. And so me and the grants team came together and we basically went back to the state board right after that rate increase was passed, and we said we'd like to resubmit this with the new information. And so we worked with the state board for a year. There were several other new requirements that we had to meet as well. Financial requirements, climate change requirements, and so we resubmitted the grant. We went back and forth, and eventually we got the good news that we did meet the requirements and that they were going to offer us the grant. So that was just incredible news. And so we got the offer on December 11th, and again, we have until January 11th to sign. And so the next steps in this grant are signing the paperwork, executing the agreement, and then beginning our planning and design process. Just to give you a heads up, we will need to come back to the board and do a budget adjustment because while this project is on our CIP, there was no money allocated to it. And so we need to get some money that we can begin using for planning. And then the grant will be paying us back as we go very quickly, but we will need to put some money out in the beginning before we start getting reimbursed. The planning and design budget is $425,000, and then construction is $4.235 million.
Is that 425 included in that 4.2? So we can get
No,
reimbursed?
that's the 4.75 is total, and so
Okay.
these are just breaking that
Gotcha.
down into planning and construction.
Thank you.
So that's where we are. Are there any additional questions? Yes.
This started, and the assumption in 2013 was that you could bring this in for $4,750,000. We've had some shocking increase in prices for jobs that engineers' estimates were what I consider to be pretty low. Have you tested the ground for what, are we gonna get another shot when we put this out to bid? What's the feeling about that?
Charles, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it's a very good question, it's a valid question, it's a very good possibility, so, we'll probably end up having to have some additive bid items in the contract where we have a little bit of flexibility that we can take items out of it if we need to. Or, if we do come in over budget, at that point, we can go back to the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and discuss the situation with them and what our options might be.
MSD, for their project, we expected it to be $4.2 million, came in at $6.4 million. And so I'm currently working with the DWR for the final budget, and they're accepting it. So we have room to make those changes during the final budget process because it is a construction grant.
And how long was that? How long had you been
About
working on it?
2014.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Different sources of funding, but yes, it'll be a
Yeah.
similar process.
What proposition is this from?
This is state revolving fund.
Well, we have Prop 1, 75% Prop 1, and then state revolving fund for the balance. Because we only have 75%, but
Well,
the option's there.
I've only seen the district, since I've been on the board, do requests for proposals for hard numbers, and sometimes we only have one bidder. Have you ever considered doing a design build concept and just interview some qualified people and see if they would like to take advantage of getting the $425,000 in their pocket? Just
I could see what policy requirements or, you know, the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, if that's a possibility with, as an option, that approach.
The reason that I think that bears looking into is that contractors often see cost savings that agencies and budgets and stuff don't consider. You know, the project, one of the things I learned in college is that the length of time that it takes to do something will exactly match the time allowed, you know, or the money allowed. So there's a possibility of another way of looking at this that might bring this in on budget or with this anticipated budget, but I'm fearful that it's going to be.
Let me share what he just said. So for our project at MSD, we didn't do the design build, but because of what you said, I wish we would have, because, you know, sometimes the engineers, you're looking at everything on paper, they're not actually going out and doing the digging. So the contractor that we got looked at all the stuff and had all these questions. We had another meeting, just simple things like, well, what do you do about lighting? Just certain, they build these, so they had so many other ideas, and maybe it should be something to entertain. I think MSD will in the future.
Russ, do you have an example of this being done in the county, or is it just a concept?
It's an alternate concept. Jeff could probably weigh in on this, whether it bears looking into, but it just, you know, Cindy's example and the recent examples we've had here, hardly anything comes in on budget. So let's just, you know, run it up the flagpole with somebody. You know. Maybe
I think it also has the advantage it could expedite the schedule.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
maybe Mazingo will make so much money on he'll just
What was
feel-
that, what was the name?
He'll feel obligated to do this at or below cost. So, no, our Director Adderman is always telling me that I should keep my comments at 30,000 feet or above. And I know I'm getting out in the weeds, but we need to look at different possibilities. Just,
Probably be a good example to try it on.
I would like to know if January of 2024 is attainable? Do you project that that's a reasonable completion
I
date?
believe so, yes.
You could ask for an extension, I would imagine, that
Well, yeah, no, I'm just,
circumstances.
the Indian mitigation will be 1.5 million.
Yeah, it's, you know, we did go through the whole environmental process, so that we've had some initial involvement from the tribe on this review of this, so.
Good.
and if we have, okay, if we need more money, we will go back to them, but if it's less money than what they give us, we'll just put that in our,
Board bonuses. Right.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll reimburse us up to whatever the full project cost is, if it's under the amount. And then the rest of the funds would go back to the state.
okay. So Joel, you're in close contact with them, and then, we have until when? Friday?
So,
Sign?
as Joel mentioned, we actually have the authorizations that we need, but because so much time had passed,
Right.
we felt like it was appropriate, it's such a big project, it was appropriate to come back to the board. Mainly to give me and the board an opportunity to take credit for all the amazing work that Joel and Charles have done over the last 5 years or more.
Do you need any action on this, or is this just a?
Unless there's any,
information.
the other, you know, the main thing was unless the board has any major concerns, then we would hold off, but otherwise I'll sign the letter today and we'll get the ball
Right.
rolling. But we just, you know, wanted to acknowledge the project team that did such a great job on this and make sure the board was aware of the award of the grant and that it's such a big project to be moving forward.
I would like to say that, obviously, move forward, sign, but maybe the next meeting, bring back what your thoughts are in regards to a design build, because I think it might be a good project. It's fairly I don't wanna say it's simple, but there's not too many components, that it might be a good opportunity to try a design build. Save a little money, free up your time for maybe something else and just oversee it, instead of you having to physically doing the work.
Or engineering committee possibly,
Oh, there you go.
either that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good.
We can oversee it, right?
Yeah.
So I got two questions. The design build concept, we've done that before. What projects have we done that on?
That's what I wanted.
Have we done that? I'm trying to think of I think
so-
maybe Bill Purley did, I think the Lake Tulloch pipe, submerged pumps were done.
Okay,
Design
so
build.
we have done it before, but not lately, not recently. Would it cost more staff time to do it? And I guess we've got one more follow-up question after that.
I think it could potentially save some staff time, you know.
Okay. And does the contract, does this contract that we have that we're gonna sign today, does it prohibit that?
I don't know. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd have to find
I just
out.
got to thumb through it real quick to see, but
They have funded what they're calling design. I mean, regardless if you do a design build, you still have to put it out for public. You have to put out an RFP.
Okay.
You've got to get contractors on board. You would still have to have some parameters for them to put together their quote.
But the elimination of steps is what's going to help us.
Right.
Looking at 196 customers for 4.75, that is just wonderful. That's just,
Right, yeah, it's
23,000 apiece.
definitely though, we're very happy about the project and.
Yeah, but it's a growing community.
We have enough, we have 13 wastewater plants, so this is one we don't have to worry so much about. So we're not after the project's completed.
okay. Any more comments?
Go for it.
Well, they're just describing it.
Good job, you guys.
There's no action. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You bet, and we will, this is a big win for the district, so we will be putting some publicity out to let the community know that we did get this grant, and this would have to be funded by ratepayers if the grant hadn't come in, and that would mean things like higher rates. So we want to make sure when we have wins like this, we get the word out.
Say, not this time, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Good job, thank you guys.
Yeah.
During the hall that we're trying to put together,
What's that?
make this announcement during the town hall that, I know we're trying to work on.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. Good job,
Thank
thanks.
you, Joe.
Thank you, Charles, too, and everybody else.
Okay. Item 4D. Are you there, Damon? Discussion action regarding awarding construction contract for the Abbott's Pass Hundreds Water Treatment Plant filter rehabilitation.
Good morning, President Underhill, directors. So we have on the CIP this year, money allocated to rehabilitate the filters at the Hunters Water Treatment Plant. These filters were installed, I want to say 91, 92. They have never been rehabbed. So the same media that was installed during construction is in the filters. And when water quality changes occur, particularly in the wintertime, it can make it rough to meet capacity demands due to the age of the media and the infrastructure. So through the CIP process, we allocated $400,000 to rehab just one of the filters at the Hunters Water Treatment Plant. And so recently, we put out a request for bid to get some costs to rehabilitate the filters, and we received those, and it looks like we had one responsive bidder, and they came in to the tune of $470,000 to rehab both filters. So our request to you is that you go ahead and approve this award to ERS Industrial Services to rehabilitate the filters at the Hunters Water Treatment Plant for $470,000.
And I would just add that while this item will be higher than what we had initially anticipated, there's several other items that we had budgeted for out of the CIP for this fiscal that we're not doing. So we're still on track to be under budget overall for capital projects on the water fund, even though this one would come in a little bit higher. But as Damon said, the value of getting 2 filters done for $470 as opposed to 1 for $400 speaks for itself, I think.
The the bidder, since there was only one, do you have some kind of a process that you go through to feel confident that they can do what they say?
Well, no, that
I mean, I
would-
know
yeah.
there's certain bonds and all that other kind of stuff they have
Right.
to do, but do you actually do something to
So we also had a
call
requirement.
references maybe?
We also had a requirement within the advertisement that any prospective bidder needs to show proof that they have rehabilitated at least 5 filters within the past X amount of years. I can't remember what we had in there, but we had some qualifiers in there for sure, because we wanted to reduce the potential that construction companies that really aren't experienced in the nature of this work didn't bid on the project. And ERS is well-versed. I've worked with them in the past in different facilities, and this is the nature of the work that they do.
And how do we verify their,
I'll second.
how do we verify their qualifications? Or has that been done already?
We have not actually directly reached out to any of the previous clients that they have had, although I was a client on 3 different filter rehab projects with ERS. So I can, we can do so, but rest assured that they know what they're doing and their work
So out of the
is.
5, you can check off 3 then.
Yes, that's right.
You're the referral.
That's pretty
that we
good.
just checked.
But happy to do so just to vet that out. But I trust in the nature of their work, they'll be fine.
But specifically for Calaveras, they haven't done,
I'm not sure if they've done any work for any of the other local water utilities that they have. CCWD. Okay.
oh. Okay. Okay, we have a
First and second,
Second.
public
first and
comment?
second. Call for the vote.
Hey, Bertha, you need to start asking for public comment.
Oh, excuse me. Public, yeah, well,
They're not here.
even though there is no public, I will call. Public comment? Okay, call for the vote.
Yeah.
Director Reddick,
Yes.
Director Thomas,
Yes.
Director Davidson.
Yes.
Director Sikkey,
Sure.
Director Thunder.
Sure.
Yes.
Had to be different.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Damon.
Okay,
And you'll bring back that budget adjustment and CIP, taking it from one building to this?
Not necessary, no, yeah.
okay.
We'll just keep the board updated on that stuff.
Mr. Kevin Williams. Oh, you are a civil engineer. Great.
Good morning.
Discussion direction regarding the district's new operations and maintenance facility.
I have some handouts.
Oh, colorful handouts, wow. You're upgrading.
You guys have been working with them, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Seems like we have campuses that have professors. Seems like we have a campus. We should have professors. Yeah.
Seen this plan. You've seen this plan, I reviewed it. And
Okay, so today I'm just gonna give an update on our, the building plan we got for our maintenance and, operations facility. The topics that we're gonna talk about today is how we selected the, site plan that we selected, the anticipated schedule, the construction bid schedule, the construction cost estimate, the building heights and roof lines. We had some questions on before. Security fencing, the overhangs and awnings, future expansion, site plans, floor plans, and elevations. And then we marked out the proposed building location out here in the yard, so we can take a look at that. The criteria that we used for selecting the site plan that we did was we looked at one building versus 2 buildings. We got with operations in the one building, fits the needs for the foreseeable future. We looked at turning radiuses through the shop areas, orientation of the roundup doors, the north-south exposure is preferred for the sun coming in through the doors. The location that maximizes future expansion, and an area that minimizes the earthwork, and the proximity to the existing drainage. So,
Can I ask a really probably simple question? Why did you choose the north-south exposure, less sun?
yeah, because when the
Around.
sun rises in the east and the west, it shines in through the doors, and
Schedule was simple.
we talk to the guys that work in the offices regularly, and that's what they prefer. So here's one of the options that we looked at when we were thinking about the 2 building scenario. We think it'd be more cost effective to do 1 building and then 1 larger building. And the next option we looked at was the 1 building kind of in the middle of the lot. This made it difficult for the trucks and stuff to maneuver inside the buildings and that type of stuff. Plus, it doesn't allow for future expansion. And the roll-up doors are in the orientation where the morning sun and the afternoon sun shine right in. And then we looked at the next option was, this is similar to what we got here, but more out in the middle of the property. It requires a lot more earthwork because you're in the area where you got more sloped up against the adjacent property, so we need some kind of retaining wall structure, and then also it gets us out closer to the creek area, which we can't maintain the existing drainage. And then here's kind of like the site plan that we selected, moving the building closer into the office here. We actually moved out a little bit further from our previous iteration, about 10 feet to the east, to give us a little bit of a parking area here along the warehouse side of the building.
Excuse me, could I ask one question? The noise, is there going to be a big factor there?
Yeah, the shop area will be on the other side of the building. This will be more the warehouse area here on this side of the building. We don't anticipate, that's why kind of we selected this plan opposed to this plan, because this plan has a traffic in and out of this parking lot here, so you get a lot of the potential for people driving heavy equipment through here. So we decided to kind of bring it up close here and have just a sidewalk and the side of the building facing this direction to minimize the noise. But there's potential for some noise.
And so this is the selection, the color?
No,
The
sorry.
next slide.
Yeah, this would be the selection here. It's kind of drawn separately. We moved it
It's
over.
easier to see the color.
I apologize. Yeah.
Cindy?
But it's similar to that.
Yeah, it was similar to that. Just a
I
little bit
got
smaller
that.
building
It's
too.
similar, but the color was easier for me to really identify the location better without all the extra goodies. But
Yeah. There's also on your
Similar.
plan here, there's kind of a bit larger drawing too that we provided.
Are you keeping that big tree in the picture?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So that's kind of how we came about what we got now. The next one is the schedule. We're working on the kind of the design and bid documents now, the specifications and that type of stuff to get it ready for when we're ready to go out. And then we're talking about the construction bid award happening just so we can start work this summer. And then the metal building fabrication and the concrete foundation. And then the last item of work will be completing the site work and the interior walls and lighting. So we talked about different bid schedules. So the district is we plan on providing an A, B, and C bid schedule. The A schedule will be the site work, grading, drainage, utilities, and paving. The B site work would be the metal building, building slab, and foundation. And C would be the interior walls, electrical, lighting. We consider this approach because we could select a different construction firm for the different items of work, or we could select a contractor to do the entire project for the lowest combined price. It also allows us to scale the project if there's some scope of work that we want to eliminate. And the bid schedule would require coordination between the contractors and the different bid schedules. So we put a clause in it, they have to work together, they have to, that type of thing. And each schedule clearly defines the scope. And then within each bid schedule, we'd have line items for different items of work. So like asphalt paving, concrete work and with actual quantities and stuff, so that if we need to scale it back, we have an opportunity to do that. And then the next one is our construction cost estimate. This is pretty much what we had last time. We added a contingency item there for $100,000 because we were looking at similar buildings and that were done with non-prevailing wage, and it's questionable how that adjustment would be for prevailing wage, and also the recent escalation in prices.
What about all the stuff that goes inside your equipment and all that? Has any purchases for that been?
No, this project is basically gives us the shell and the interior walls. As far as the lifts and that kind of stuff for equipment lifts and tools and that type of stuff, we didn't. This project doesn't account for that.
Yeah, I wasn't at the meeting when you guys brought this in, and I imagine you approved going forward with the building. But at one point, we were talking about only a $500,000 budget.
No, I
So
know.
here we are at 772, 773, and then it's nothing inside yet. This is just the shell.
Well, no, that's actually got the interior walls, and it's got $100,000 for the.
Okay, well, what about
for the
the
offices.
lockers, the desks, the lifting things on the cars and the, and
Clear-
some of it I would imagine.
We already own that,
free.
right? We'll just move them over. They're in the.
A lot of that
And the
equipment we
lifts
already
also,
have.
the-
They're in the rental space now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just have a couple of questions. The detail on your foundation plan and stuff, I mean, that's gonna be done by I assume we can do it. I mean, I assume you guys are qualified to do the foundation. But again, you've got a 6-inch slab with 4,000 pound concrete, which to me seems pretty excessive. I don't know why you would need, 6.5 set concrete, because it's gonna have rebar anyway.
It specifies welded wire fabric, right?
Oh, is that what it says?
Yeah.
Well, either one, I mean, whatever you're gonna do, but I mean, the foundation, I mean, the civil engineer will have to design the foundation, and it's gonna be based on the calcs and the anchor bolts and that sort of thing. But I just don't think we need 4,000 pound concrete. What made us do that? Is that our normal spec?
Yeah, the district doesn't have a normal spec. We followed some, went back and looked at other specs for other projects that were similar, and that's how we came up with this spec. But
Generally, it's 2,800 pounds.
okay, well, there's no reason why we couldn't put a criteria instead of the actual thickness in there. I don't see that being a problem.
I'm along with Jeff on this. You could get a better slab with 1/2-inch reinforcing steel at 4 inches thick than you'll get with a 6-inch slab with welded wire fabric. I have never seen a slab with welded wire fabric that does anything except crack excessively. And I don't know, it just.
Okay.
Well, but we're also, what he's calculating out here, and one of the ways to prevent it is now you have the early entry saw, so you'll cut this thing, the same day we pour it, probably.
Yeah.
So it'll already be divided up into the right size spots, so it shouldn't continue to move. But I agree, I'm a fan of the 1/2-inch rebar, or even 3/8 rebar, 2 foot on center.
Okay.
I mean, there's other ways to do this, I just don't know if we need to call out,
Okay. Well,
specs at this point, because
How about the fabric or the mesh? Not the mesh,
I
but
generally use fiber mesh, and that's almost all we ever use. But, I mean, it's one or the other. I think certainly for this type of thing, I think it would be appropriate. I mean, everybody at the Rancheria, they do everything 5 inches, 3,000 pound concrete with rebar 2 foot on center.
Okay.
For all their buildings that they do over
Maybe
there.
we'll have them look and see the scratch.
Well, I built on, 5 of them, and there was never an issue, but I mean, do we know what soil we got over there? Is it expansive, or is it shale, or?
I looked at the geotech report from when this build was originally built. I didn't see anything about expansive soils in there.
The other thing on the, go back to the costs again, you have I just, now, for the exterior flat work, and is the site work grading and drainage, that's all figured in there?
Yeah, we looked at I was gonna get to that section, but we looked at the site work. This latest plan, we modified it to have a 20-foot concrete apron around the building where the forklift could circle the building without turning and tearing up the asphalt.
Yeah.
And then we go with a little bit thinner asphalt section. So we're looking at that, and then also the the ability to build the construction right up to the building with the concrete is, and also in the front here, kind of match, you got concrete sidewalk, you know, to go to the little asphalt section, and then the concrete would be,
So what square foot price did you use on that?
I don't have my cost estimate, I'll have to grab that in a little bit.
Well, because you got asphalt paving, so is that the asphalt paving, is that the category that the flat work will be in?
No, the concrete work around the building would be under the site work. The asphalt paving was just the asphalt paving and the base rock section that goes around it.
Okay.
So any questions?
Yeah.
Right, next thing we were talking about was the building heights. We're proposing the 20-foot building heights to improve overhead clearances in the second floor mezzanine. We looked at the constant roof height would provide a lower initial cost and a staggering roof.
I read somewhere where you were gonna increase the insulation in the lid.
Yeah, we talked about that when we visited the site out there, that a minimum of R11 insulation in the roof.
Well, that's the standard, so, I
Okay.
mean, I would assume that would be in, well, R3 is, or 3 inches, R10, and then there's also, like I was saying, that Reflectar stuff, which is only like a ½ inch thick, but I believe that goes to like an R13, and I really like that stuff, because it's a lot easier to work with, because it's so much thinner, but it has a R value. It's called Reflectar.
Okay.
Jeff, Director Davidson, how much have you been involved in the planning with Kevin up to
Well,
this point?
at one point, I was supposed to do it again with the overhangs, but I've generated this on my computer, this building, and gave them what the price would be for me to purchase the building. So at least they have that background.
So it seems like with someone of his knowledge and expertise on this board available to these meetings, and in this building 2 or 3 times a month, it seems like that would be something, you know, I feel much more comfortable, you know, if this all goes through the Director Davidson himself or the engineering committee or both, before coming to us for making decisions and finalizing things.
Well, I think staff has done a pretty good job.
I mean, like on insulation and where does the asphalt go, how thick the pavement, you know, the cement is.
Well, I think they've done a good job on the design. I think it's a practical building. They didn't add a bunch of overhangs. The overhangs are gonna be costly, but they're a lot more expensive when they're on the ends. I mean, just having the little eave 5 foot out there, it's not all that expensive.
Is this designed so that can be added later? That feature that you're just talking about?
No, they're on there now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we got that on there. I've been working I've tried to incorporate everything that we've discussed into this plan. So as far as the minor details is the 4 and 5 inch, I can work with him on that. As far as
the person we hired to run the warehouse, that's not you.
No, so
That person and his input.
he's been involved in preliminary discussions about layout inside the warehouse, but at this point, we're not at the real specific design phase there.
You don't think that would be, well, I'd like to hear from him sometime about how he feels about this plan, if he's the one who's working it. I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Damon, have you had conversations with Mike?
Yeah.
Have you guys all, have we met as a board? I just wasn't at-
Yes.
Mike has weighed in on.
He was here at the last time we presented this item.
Yeah, and I wasn't here.
Just his general feedback is he thinks it's great, in terms of the warehouse size and now. like
Well, you can do
Mike
it
said,
either way. I don't know if they've,
how the racking is and how it's
This looks like
designed
a
inside.
flush,
He will
so-
really be the one that weighs in on
I
that.
mean, this is not a final
We made a
design.
comment about, the forklifts on the cement, not on the asphalt, that makes perfect sense. I don't know if that came from him.
that's where me and Davidson met out in the field, and we looked at some buildings, and that's kind of where we came up with that idea.
Got it.
We looked at 3 buildings that they did down in Linden. One was 22,000 square feet. The other was 12 and the other was 10. So it was a pretty good, you know, and they were tall buildings, so I think you got a good idea what it's gonna look like.
And did you ask them what they would do different? If they were building a new one?
Yeah, we did actually, and I was gonna get to some of
That's
that
true.
here, so we can kind of, when we go along, there were some things that we incorporated that we didn't like about that building that we're trying to make better on this one.
Kevin, I have a question. In the elevations, you clearly show windows that you would expect to have in a building that has a mezzanine, but in your cross-section view, there's no detail on a future mezzanine. Is that something that you're figuring on doing with our?
Yeah, I didn't really, I had it on there and I didn't really want to confuse the issue with drawing it on there as part of this project. But yes, we've kind of scaled out where the windows go in relation to where the finished floor for the second floor would be
Okay.
in relation to the windows.
But I think I can answer my own question on that, but on the cross-section view, you will show how the supporting girts would be affixed to the vents, or for the, what do you call these structural, these columns. Because even though the floor might not be built at this point, it's, intuition would tell me that element should be attached if there ever is gonna be a floor there before the skin goes on. It's just a lot easier to bolt it on.
It'll be independent. It won't, I mean, you can build this, you can frame this out of wood and have it be independent of the metal structure. I don't think it'll have anything to do with it.
Okay,
I mean, we've done that many times.
okay.
I mean, I believe it's actually, where these are, we've got a column and a column. Isn't that correct, where the offices are? That's one bay by itself?
Yes, that would be one base, so it would fit nicely in
Yeah, so
between the
there'll be a little
columns.
frame right up on the column and then
Okay.
go over.
Yeah, so, yeah, we tried to lay it out so that each bay was at a column. I mean,
Yeah.
we put a note on here that, you know, that the contractor, the design engineer can modify the column location if it's more cost effective, as long as it doesn't impair our ability to, you know, to make, to.
Well, the
use it.
columns generally, they're either bypass, which means they're 8 inches in from the steel line, and then the girt goes on the outside, and then the metal goes on that. Or they're, a lot of times they're 1 inch offset, which I prefer, because they, particularly when you're putting the insulation on, they have a tendency to bulge out at the columns. And then of course they have the flush, which is that.
Okay.
But I had one question here. I see you guys, you got 3'6" doors. They're usually, the industry is 3.0 and 4.0.
Yeah, we were going for one of the requests was some oversized doors in this
Well,
building.
we use 4-foot doors all the time. They really, I mean, I don't know, I've never seen a 3'6" metal door. I'm sure you could get it, but I think it's gonna be a specialized
Probably more expensive
size.
than before.
So I would just go with 4-foot doors.
Okay,
They're very common, but I haven't seen a 3'6" door ever.
How about
Yeah.
7 foot high versus 6'8"?
I
Well, it'd
pulled
be
the-
7 foot high as well, 407
yeah. I saw it on the data sheet, but if it's more common, it's probably more cost effective.
304.
The site fence and security, so we
It's
gotta,
gonna be,
the gate that's out here currently, we wanted to relocate it to the front of the building so that this becomes one secure area back here. So we'd have a fence going from this corner of the building to the new metal building. And then from that, east side of the metal building to the existing fence line would be another, fence. That fence over there would have an automatic gate in it, similar to the one we have on the back side of the building here for access control. And it was still, the public and stuff could still park in the front side here, and then only the back half of the building would be the secure side of the building.
Let me ask you about your floor sumps.
Yes,
So are you intending to have that concrete not be flat?
the concrete not be flat. Well, what we anticipate is that we were gonna have the site work contractor would come in here and grade the thing to within a tenth. And then the guys doing the building, he'd bring in a backhoe service or whatever to fine grade it out so that we would slope to the sumps. If you look on the floor plan here, we got some light yellow, they're kind of hard to see, but that's kind of the grading plan to kind of grade it towards the sumps. So if there's a fluid spill or something, then they could, that'd be mainly done in the concrete portion of the work, would be the sloping towards that sump. So if they're changing transmission or something, the fluid runs out, or they're changing oils or something, they'd have a place to capture it for it to spill all over the floor. It's similar to what they have the TUD facility, I guess it's Sonora, so.
Well, we did that on the vet clinic that I did over in Buena Vista. It's just gonna add a lot of cost to this slab. I mean, anytime you're not dealing with something that's flat, because you're gonna have to, we'll have to, I'm not even sure where these are gonna go to. What's it gonna, is it gonna go into a septic system? Is it gonna go to?
No, it was just gonna be sorry.
Just a catch?
Yeah, it was gonna be a catch, and then we'd have to suck it out with a kind of,
Back on?
back on, or some kind of hand pump or something. I mean, they have a little, or whatever it is, a little electric pump to clean it out with the fluids. So that was.
Do you know what the cost was to put this floor sump, and the extra cost was versus just a flat and cleaning up your spill without putting it against it?
We tried to go with a standard size, kind of like a concrete that you could get from Oldcastle, like a 3x3x2. That could be a precast section that could easily be put in there, and then you have to put some kind of coating on it to protect it from chemicals. So it'd be.
Well, it sounds like the expense is grading it to come to that.
Well, no, the expense is in the place of the slab. I mean, when you have to, you have to screed around all these things at a lower level than the rest of the thing. It's,
It might be a code requirement, but if it's not, we can look at the cost benefit of it when we get to final design.
Yep.
No, I think it's gonna be, it's gonna add 10 grand or more to the project, maybe just for the plumbing, I mean.
There's no plumbing.
Yeah, but is it?
Well, maybe
Oh,
we should
they're
say
just
you only
holes.
get X amount of money and then make it work.
We can get some bags of sawdust and some shop vacs for that.
If you set up going
So
from High Point down there, is that just?
the next section is the future expansion. We're going to specify the building to be designed where the east side of the building could be expanded with either a covered storage area or extending the building out. We relocated the drainage further to the east so that it would be easier for that expansion later. And then also, we've included kind of a grading plan for the backside of the lot where we're going to borrow the material to bring over here. We've included that as part of this to just do some rough grading out there, 2%, to get us where the site could be usable. We'd have to put some kind of herbicide out there, something to keep the weeds down and that type of stuff. So the proposed building pad is at 992.25, and then the proposed site work concrete around it is 3 inches below that. That was kind of a recommendation because the way the foundations are on these metal buildings, that we'd have a 1 foot planar area around the building that would be gravel, and that would allow you to bring your siding down past the construction joint there, and it makes for a cleaner job. Similar to the elevation of this building here, we're within 6 inches of the elevation.
Maybe we misunderstood each other, because I think for the ADA compliance, the actual flat work is gonna have to be 1.5 inches, or the metal stops 2 inches below the finished floor slab.
Yes.
So, what we'll have to do is raise, at least where we have, pedestrian access, we'll have to raise that up to be flush with the finished floor.
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna have to be close, because we can only have 2% grade to be ADA compliant.
Yeah, so if you look at this, the elevation 6D here, I kind of tried to show that here where we slope down, ramp concrete entrances and driveways to ADA slope there so that we could slope it down to the site work.
Well, I mean, that's something we can deal with that later, but I don't think as it's printed here, that's accurate.
Okay.
So, because that concrete's gonna have to come up to that, pretty close to that door height, just so we have our 2%, or no more than 2%. Because you don't want to ramp it up real close and make a sharp transition.
Okay, so we can look at the site work elevation compared to the foundation slab. Okay.
And did you include the ADA striping and,
Yeah, I tried to, so we proposed to have right here on this front side of the building here, we're gonna have the handicap parking is gonna be right here in the front, the ADA parking. Be the first spot here in the front.
again, what the county's gonna do is they're gonna require that you go and hire the local ADA guy to write up a plan for you. So I mean, that's something, I've got that guy's number if you need it, but
Yes.
you might want to go over to the county and find out what, because they're going to make this into a commercial, full-blown commercial project.
Even if we don't have public allowed, I couldn't imagine
Oh,
public being allowed there.
They're just silly right now. I mean,
Could I just make one comment?
Yes.
You know, we're right here, and that building is going to be right there,
Yes.
blocking the view.
No,
No.
the stakes are in if you go out there and just see.
Yeah,
what's-
no, I know where it's gonna be, but, because I know we have the other property over there to move it further back so that we wouldn't have that great big building right there. But, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, we
You looked at all that because it would be great.
Yeah, we looked at all that when we talked about, we were trying to, it eliminates what we can do in the future, and also the grading, the contours and stuff makes it more costly to relocate it
To go
somewhere else.
further.
Yeah, yeah, so if you look over here where we like
Right.
the other plans, we talked about moving over there, but once you get up along the far side over there, you got some grading issues, and then we got a lot of drainage that comes off that adjacent property there that we gotta contend with too.
I can't do that, or I can't do that, I wanna do that.
have we inquired about road impact fees? And I know you got a permit cost in there, 20 grand. When I built that little warehouse that was 50 by 80 in where is it, Toyon, they charged him like $35,000 road impact fees.
I would think that this was developed with these types of projects in mind. These parcels were developed with these types of projects in mind, so I wouldn't anticipate anything like that, but we'll have to work through that process.
I guarantee you're gonna have road impact fees.
Right, I just wouldn't expect anything exorbitant, but we'll have to
But it's gonna
submit
be
those applications.
substantial, you know.
And then, kind of want to go over the plans here a little bit more in detail. This is the site plan here. So like we talked about, we moved it over a little bit further from what we had in the previous one. And we relocated the drainage area over to here. This drainage area could eventually be covered if you wanted to, expanding further, but this allows for us to expand the building 30 to 40 feet and still maintain the driveway past the property on that side over there. And then, and like we talked about, we included the additional parking on the west side of the building, it was talked about. Additional drainage we added to bring in from the existing culvert. We looked at there's gonna be some additional shedding of water off this property here that goes towards that drainage, so we need to kind of capture the additional drainage. So we got a drain pipe that comes down along the property edge here and ties into the drainage system here. And then we already talked about how we're relocating the wrought iron gate to the front of the building here. This is the larger grading plan here. So we're going out to the far side of this property here, and we're gonna grade it like a 1 to 3 slope down to the property, and then we'll have a semi-flat area. 2% slope is what we're looking at for that area there. It's about 3/4 of an acre lot that we'd have back there that'd be fairly graded. And then in the future, there'd be potentially, if you wanted to develop that land, there could be potentially, you could balance the dirt by moving it down here to the basin area and building some retaining walls and that type of stuff. Next one is our floor plan. It's similar to pretty much what we had before. We had the corridor between the warehouse and the shop area, so we get some flow in between there. We looked at moving the offices to the west side of the building, and then make it so you can unload on either side of the truck in the warehouse area that was talked about before that. It just didn't leave us a lot of room there, because when you got to unload on both sides, you got to leave room for a forklift, so it's difficult to be able to store any materials there. And also, we'll need a dividing wall between the warehouse and the shop area for fire, so we'll have to build full height wall, that type of stuff. So putting the building and the offices in the middle makes a little more sense on that approach. The next one is our, we already kind of talked about this, the overhangs, awnings, we talked about on the north and south side, because they're cost effective to include those. And also, when you're walking from one door to the other door, or from the office to the doors, you'd be covered. The ones on the east and west sides aren't really necessary to have an overhang, because they're coming from an uncovered area to the building already. So you're not going from one enclosed space to another. So the overhangs didn't make as much sense on those sides for the cost they. And you can look at some of the details on here. We got ballers that we're talking about putting in front of every entrance, vinyl windows. We're going to enlarge the doors to the 4-foot doors.
What did you say, vinyl windows?
Vinyl windows, yeah.
The one thing about metal building windows is you really need to buy them from the manufacturer, just because of the way they trim out.
Okay.
And I think they're gonna end up being aluminum.
Aluminum.
So I wouldn't put that vinyl recommendation in there, but they come basically with clip-in trim, and then they gotta have a headpiece for the drip, so they'll come with that. So you wouldn't wanna spec out a window that won't necessarily work right for a metal building. So I would just put,
per the manufacturer.
get rid of the, per manufacturer specs. And then also on here, I see you got a 12-foot ventilation, and you call it a ventilation fan. Those are usually 10 feet. And they come in either 12-inch or 9-inch. I would suggest that we do 12-inch, a little more ventilation. And then also the translucent panels are generally 3 by 10.
Okay.
I mean, it's all just kind of an industry standard, so I don't know that you even need to call them out what size they are, because it's gonna, I mean, they attach between two purlins anyway, so they usually go to run the whole length of that. And it kind of depends on how the building gets designed as to how big they actually are gonna be.
Okay.
Kevin, looking back at your floor plan on page 2, in today's environment of gender sensitivities and stuff, are we going to be okay with one toilet and one locker room?
Yeah, I put a locker / second toilet. That was in either or. If we can get away with one toilet, we'll make the other one a locker room. But if the county or whoever the requirements are, we'll plan on having a second toilet.
I'm gonna guess too that the county's gonna require that you put a shower, a handicap ADA shower in. I think it's gonna be a requirement.
Okay.
And they're really specific. They actually have to be roll in, you know, you have to like pour the slab an inch down or something. So you might want to make sure, again, that the ADA guy will, you know, you'll have to do whatever he says, so.
Okay.
Is that Randy Sparks?
Pat Bentley show.
Okay. Thank you, sir. How about eye washing station and stuff like that?
Well, on that little, we built 1,500 square feet of office, the same stuff as we're doing here. And they only had 3 employees, and they required that they do a roll-in shower
Okay.
in one of the bathrooms.
Oh, yeah. And then we have, the color, we'll pick the color once from the available colors from the manufacturer, standard colors. The west elevation here, we've got our signs on there, and right now we have them installing our furnace signs. And we talked about the gravel around the building, the landscape area, and we were put a kind of a irrigation through any ramp areas, so we can, if there's future planning that needs to happen. Downspouts in the corner of the buildings and where they're needed for the, and then we already talked about this pretty much here, 2 to 12 ceiling.
Unless I'm overlooking it, Kevin, I don't, where's your effluent gonna go? To the existing septic system or what?
Yeah, we got, sorry, I skipped over that. If you look at the site plan, we got a line that goes out to a tank, and then we're gonna
Okay.
connect that tank to our system. We probably need to put a pump in that tank there to get it up to the existing septic system. But the existing septic system was designed to handle a building like this.
It was?
Yeah, the guys that originally designed it included the warehouse space in their calculations for the, so we should be good.
Well, I see that you got a septic lid at 990, 990/41, and your existing finished floor is 992. Are you sure that you have to have that collection thing? It looks like you're going uphill to that collecting box and then.
No, yeah, we have the standard slope on this, we're gonna call it the standard slope of ½ inch or whatever it is, to get us out to that box there, and then from there we'll have to go, we'll have to pump it up
Okay.
over to the,
That's a distribution box, okay.
yeah.
Okay, well, unless there's other questions,
So what we're really asking at this time, because there were a lot of questions the last time we came back, and I have to applaud Kevin and operations staff, since we acquired the property, last summer. They put a tremendous amount of work in together, developing. It's been an iterative process. The plans changed over time, and I think they've arrived at a really good use of that property and a really good plan. Thank Director Davidson. We've met with him on several occasions to inform this. But I felt like at the last board meeting, there were still enough high-level questions that we wanted to bring it back one more time just to get the board's support to move forward with an RFP. That'd be the next step. We wouldn't spend any money or anything until the bids come back. We bring a contract and a budget amendment to the board at that time. But we wanted to get a motion of support from the board at this point to move forward with, at least at a conceptual stage. Obviously, we still have some of the smaller, finer details to work out, but to move forward with this concept.
Okay, when you go out for an RFP, will you bring it back to the finance or come back to the board?
We would probably just bring that back to the board. If we had a contract that we felt comfortable moving forward with, or recommending to the board, we would probably just bring that back to the full board. But if there's just some surprises, then yeah, maybe we'd have another step in the process there.
So we are looking for a motion to
No.
move forward as planned. I'll go ahead and make that
That'd
motion.
be great.
Wait a second, wait a second.
Well, it wouldn't be
We can still
discuss.
it's not in
We can
a,
discuss as much as we want to.
Oh,
Need a
no,
motion.
but I don't think we have a motion.
Michael just asked us for.
we don't have to. I think we're just looking for, I think a motion for
Yeah.
support of this concept would be great, just so that
Oh, okay.
as staff, we have the comfort that we're in lockstep with the board on this project, is really what we're
So
after.
moved, and what I like about it, and thank you, Kevin, for bringing it back, what I wanted to find out is what are the other things that we looked at before we came to that design and where it's located, and you did that very nicely. Explain why we couldn't do it this way, and why we did it this way, and what the thought that went into that. And that was one of the things I was looking for, on how we're gonna use that property, and what the future uses are, and why we decided with this design. Or this location more.
My concern is the budget.
Yeah, so and there's a discussion of that in the staff report. We've identified the source of funds that could be used if it comes in at the price that we've projected, and that money is available. If it comes in, higher than what we projected, we would obviously, in any event, we would bring it back to the board for approval before we approved any expenditure of funds.
We're gonna bring that back to approval anyway, we just have a motion of support, right?
Absolutely, that's a contract that the board would have to approve, and a budget amendment as well.
I was going back over my thing, and I did have a question here. There was a statement that said, by utilizing the ventilation fans and upgraded ceiling insulation, only the offices within the building will require air conditioning. What did you?
Yeah, we're not gonna, the areas that have the big roll-up doors, we're not gonna put air conditioning there, because there's so much, it couldn't keep up, so we just air conditioning the offices.
Okay.
So there was one concern about the ceiling height, was the cooling all that mass air up there, so.
Have you guys done, are you planning to do the Title 24, the heat and air calcs and all that? Or you want the contractor to do that?
At this point, when I was writing the specification for the air conditioning, we kind of put it back on them. We kind of put the system that we want.
Because they'll have to, I mean, if,
Yeah.
and this is, again, this is kind of why I want all these things separate, because, that contractor is most likely gonna be a different guy than the guy that does the metal building erection. And also, I'd like to have it continue to be separate, just in case we go to county and they say, we want $80,000 in hookup fees or impact fees or something. And maybe we phase that, the office section at some point in the future.
Right. That makes sense.
Okay. So back on your cost estimate, I know that you said that you put in 100,000 for contingency.
Yeah, there was some question, we were going over the estimates from the cost on some similar buildings, and there was, the cost that we had, and there was closer to what the non-prevailing wage rates were, so we'll put that 15% in there to account for kind of an unknown, we didn't have a good example of a prevailing wage job that was similar to this, so we put that there as a contingency, mainly for that.
So you will massage this cost estimate, as you're doing more.
Yeah, we're gonna do a kind of a detailed estimate. We're gonna break these different items into the different schedules of values, so part of that would be attributed to contract A, and part would be attributed to contract B. So we'll move the money around, and we'll have a very detailed scope of work under each item, each guy's item of work, and then also we got clauses in there that whatever needs to get done to make this feasible. We'll have that kind of clause in the specifications too that covers all the.
If I was bidding this building outside, in the normal world, foundation and the building package and the erection would be about 200,000, not the interior work. So I think we're covered on the building side. We may be a little short on the concrete because of what you guys are gonna do with those sumps and stuff, but I think it's pretty close.
This statement about having, it must be stamped by a registered professional engineer, the manufacturer provides that stamp, doesn't he?
Right, but not the foundation plan. So that'll have to be done by another civil.
Okay. Well, he's a civil.
Well, if he can do it, then he can do it.
Yeah, I think that's mainly the guy doing the building would hire a.
That's what I do.
consultant, yeah.
It cost me $600 to have a foundation design.
And then it leaves it up to them. They can do different kinds of foundations depending on what's cheapest for them. So it could save us money than telling them what to do.
He'll, at the very onset, he'll want the soils report.
Yeah,
Well,
it's gonna be a lot of fill there, so we got.
Do you already have a soils report? Because the county is gonna require that because it's
We have
commercial.
soils reports from when we built this building, so it should cover that.
Yeah, I'm almost positive the county will require that.
Another one?
This is the same report.
Oh, okay. Okay, anything else from the board?
No?
Well, thank you so much for
Let's get it built.
bringing us up to speed.
Now, when we do the RFP, who are we gonna send that out to? Is that just something we put a public notice and?
We'll do public notice, I think, but we'll also probably, I don't know, if we want to send it out to a list of contractors or
Excuse me.
Rebecca, the public bid.
Yeah, we're gonna try to put it on there.
Okay, so there's another website that contractors have access to that we're going to try to utilize. So we'll just try to make sure we get it out as far and wide as we can.
Okay, excuse me, let's go back. Scott will make the motion
But can I
to,
say one thing though first? Can you make sure, when the RFPs are prepared, before they go out, it goes to the engineering committee for, a final review?
I would prefer at this stage, I think we have really picked this thing apart. So I would really like to get the RFP out as quickly as possible, but we're going to miss it. You know, contractors are lining up their construction season for this
But-
next summer. And I
But Jeff
think,
mentioned that he'd kind of like to see some of these things broken down, so would those be separate RFPs? There's a separate RFP.
it's
for the
broken
guy
up that
who's
way
building.
already.
Three.
Yeah, we have those separate schedules
Yeah.
in here. So my sense is, or my recommendation to the board is we've been to the engineering committee multiple times with this and the full board multiple times.
I'm content with them, with
I
where
think we're
we're
ready
at.
to go out to bid.
I mean, there's a lot of those things that I was talking about, we can discuss that in the field when we're, out there with the contractors. So.
But the adjustments that he suggested, the 4.0 doors and windows, you'll incorporate all that.
Oh,
in
for
the
sure,
RFP.
yeah.
Yeah, they're just some standards that,
Using
Yeah.
industry standards with the building
Yeah.
is where it's at.
okay, Mr. Radovich.
No, I already made the motion, that we support as outlined, moving forward.
Great.
Okay,
I'll second that.
okay.
Overwhelming public comment.
Director Ryan?
Yes.
Director Thomas?
Yes.
Director Davis?
Yes.
Director Takeda?
Yes.
President Underwood?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank
Thank
you
you, Kevin.
again.
Good job.
Uh-huh. 6A, report on the December 2019 Operations Department.
Good morning again, everybody. I will be brief. December, in consideration of the holidays, was not without a lot of work, efforts in all, namely Copperopolis and Rancho Calaveras associated with service line repair. Once again, you can see that we repaired 31 different service lines in Rancho, I believe 6 or 7 in Copper, a couple up on the pass for a total volume of about 125 gallons a minute. Conserved through those repair efforts. Incidentally, in Rancho Calaveras right now, we're at 6 in-process service line leaks, which is down from an average of about 50. And here's an example of one completed in the month of December, which is 7 feet of service line replaced. You can see the picture on the left depicts it's kind of hard to see, but 2 wraparounds or full circle clamps are on an existing aged service line that is also leaking again a couple feet away. And so staff went in, and the picture on the right, it's a little bit hard to see, but there's the water main deep into that hole there with the new service line connected to it. And then here is just another depiction of how backfill has negatively impacted service lines in all service areas, just rock after rock after rock on these service lines.
What did you do before you had VACCON trucks? I mean,
That's a great question.
Small
shovels
yeah.
of water.
I have a lot of experience with vac trailers, and I look at some of the repairs our guys complete, and I would think that they would be filling up a vac trailer and having to dump it every 2 to 3 minutes with the amount of soil and water that are coming out of some of these service line repairs. So VACCONs have really helped kind of, Michael and Rebecca and Jesse and I, we talk about this a lot, is the fact that, we have staff that are used to kind of managing some of the issues that the district has in general, and it become kind of the norm, and we need to start to slowly turn the ship so that those are kind of anomalies. And VACCON use, if it weren't for VACCONs, I mean, we would be we would be overwhelmed by the work effort. So here's a 2-inch water main repair, just a failing connection on the left, replaced with a ROMAP connection on the right. And then here's some work that was done. We have some operators that work really well with the CAL FIRE camp out of Vallecito, and they work to help facilitate work. And so what we have here is we have the crew at the regulating reservoir in West Point, which I can't remember what the new name is.
I think we're leaning towards Bummerville Reservoir at this point.
Is it Palmerville?
I think we're in Bummerville.
Oh,
It's right off of Bummerville.
The Bummerville
So I think we're leaning
Reservoir?
towards Bummerville
It's
Reservoir.
not Palmer or Meter Parton. It's not the Meter Parton Reservoir. So we have some. So we have the crew actually working to cut in a trench line, which was given the thumbs up by the Division of Dam Safety, so that we can install some electrical wiring associated with our aerator out in the regulating reservoir. And that aerator operates to work to make sure that algae does not grow when the reservoir turns over. As you guys can remember, last year we had some issues associated with taste and odor. And so we're pretty sensitive to that. They did some great work. And it just kind of illustrates how operators from one portion of the district can work with operators in another portion of the district to get work done. Here's some pictures of the final work associated with the Vallecito reclaimed water pump station project. That was a grant-funded project, I believe. I want to say 2016. You guys may have heard of this when it came on board. This project is now complete. So the last of the piping was installed in the month of December, as was the final cleanup of the site. You can see the building in the right is the building that was constructed as part of the grant project. And then the picture, and you can see the photographer on the left, is looking back towards where the electrical ties into the main MCC panel, and also the storage tank on the right is where the effluent flows from towards the building where the pump station exists, and then it discharges out to the neighbors as needed, to be determined in the future. And then, so we've been working with the mechanics to see if they can get us some really good pictures of some of their work efforts, and they're starting on that path. So these aren't necessarily great pictures, but they do illustrate some of the work that they've done in the month of December. One is, oftentimes our treated water pumps are controlled with clay valve or control valves, pressure reducing, pressure sustaining. They inhibit an extreme inrush of pressure as the pump kicks on. And so we had one fail at the Hunter's Water Treatment Plant. There's a diaphragm in that picture on the left. That's a valve, and it's not a great picture, but within that valve is a diaphragm, and it operates, and over time they get holes in them through small pieces of debris from piping getting in there and just kind of rubbing against that rubber. So there was a hole in that one, and what happens in that case is oftentimes the pump will turn on, and then it'll receive an indication to shut off, but because there's a hole in the diaphragm, the water is equalized on both sides of the valve and it won't shut. It'll just run. So our guys were able to get up there and rebuild the valves at the Hunter's Water Plant. Incidentally, we have, I want to say, 100+ control valves in the Ebbets Pass service area in the distribution system that need to be maintained and rebuilt and rehabilitated and tested. And so as we transition away from working on our district vehicles, our aged fleet, the hope is that we push those mechanics out into the field to work on all these control valves that we have everywhere. And then the picture on your right, it's a little hard to see, but that's a UV wiper assembly on a UV bulb. And this was at the Vallecito wastewater treatment plant, and it was calling our operators out in an attempt to operate, I want to say, every 15 minutes. And the mechanics were able to get up there and determine there was a control issue or a polarity issue with the magnets inside of the device, and they were able to fix it and eliminate the issue and put the system back in working order. So a little bit of an example of the work that they do. And like I said, it's short and sweet this month, but that's the final product of the Vallecito Reclaim Pump Station.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Damon.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
One thing, Damon, I wanted to acknowledge what I heard in your office recently about Bill Cardinal's redesigning that Go Fast system down in Copper, the Copper Cove wastewater. That there was a problem with the chemistry in the settling ponds. And a company came out to install a demonstration mechanism to improve that and make it comply, make our system comply. It wasn't working. So Bill Cardinal, I learned just by walking by your door one day.
Yeah, right, yeah.
You can tell him more than I can regurgitate, but he redesigned it and
He-
made it work.
He redesigned it, so we're working with a consultant on a pilot study to look at nitrate removal at the Copper Cove wastewater treatment facility. And we received this pilot unit. It's about an 8x10 size rectangle, and it has a couple tanks in it with some chemical pumps and some tubing. And it was in a poor state of operation. And as we tried to run the unit, we couldn't get reliable data because the unit wouldn't run right. And Bill redesigned it and created a template for the company to show them how they should design their pilot package units in the future so that their clients get a satisfactory product. And they really did respond, and we're kind of like, oh, wow, thank you, Bill. You know what, here's some new media for those units, and here's a new pump, we'll make it good. And so it's
about
really
some
been a
stock
benefit.
options?
Yeah, benefit to the district. So hats off to Bill.
Nice. Yeah, good job, Bill.
Good job, Bill.
Yes.
An
Okay.
award recipient.
Thank you.
Bring him in here, get him a trophy.
Okay.
I will try to be quick also. I know we're running long here. As Damon mentioned, the holidays obviously since our last meeting, so I've notified the management team to cancel the holidays next year. Not enough got done. I will say we've already kicked off. We've been having some discussions, and Rebecca's already made some contributions towards rethinking our CIP and how we move forward. And so we have already kicked off our CIP update, and which obviously will lead into budget prep for next fiscal year. And we want to get a head start on that. We want to get out in front of it because I think what we hope to present this year and going forward is going to be more robust than what we have in the past. And that will kind of, interestingly, the next 6 months I think are going to be very, very interesting just in terms of that effort. Getting a handle on our infrastructure capacity and our infrastructure financing needs, budget development. I had lunch with President Underhill, and I know it's a priority of hers. It was a priority of Director Thomas's, and I think the board shares the desire to have a strategic planning workshop. And then also move forward with our strategic planning process that we budgeted for. So I think all of that stuff actually dovetails nicely together, along with a work plan that I'll be presenting to the board. So that I think will be a lot of just a very interesting process over the next 6 months that I'm looking forward to. We did decide to hold off on the biomass power plant grant that we discussed at the last board meeting. It is just a matter of staff bandwidth and resources, our ability, our time to pull that application together and implement the application. It didn't. We just don't have the resources for it at this point. But we also are going to. We want to pursue partnerships with other local partners, and possibly position ourselves next year to be better prepared for that grant, because we do want to. I do think it is directly in our mission to support sustainable forest management or sustainable forest managed industries that will help protect our watersheds, the watersheds that our customers rely on. So we're not pursuing that grant, but we will be pursuing that, that line of work. We, as far as I know, I just heard from Peter, who's on his way back from Stockton, that the GSP is on its way to, never mind. Wow, that was fast. You need to slow down. No. On its way to approval. Good?
Good.
And the county will be approving it it's on their agenda for next Tuesday. So we are anticipating the county's approval, albeit a little bit late. But the plan should move forward today. We had a meeting with Dave Andrus and Steve Sarantopoulos from Utica. Very interesting discussions there around use of the slurry line, use of additional ag water supply on the Highway 4 corridor. And so we'll have another meeting with them in the near future, and we want to move those initiatives forward. Not on the timeline that I had previously hoped. It's always more complicated than you would like it to be, but those projects will be moving forward as well. Let's see, county has reached out with a paving, are they calling it a paving program? Yeah. I think it's their paving program. And it's sort of a loose schedule of paving projects that they are going to be pursuing over the next couple of years. And we certainly appreciate the fact that they're giving us a heads up on what where the areas that they intend to target. We have some concerns because we're doing a lot of work in some of those areas. Not surprising that some of the areas with road issues or some of the areas where we have infrastructure issues. So we are trying to match up those projects so that to the extent possible, we minimize the amount of work that we're doing in newly paved roads. So we'll be coordinating with the county in a couple of meetings this month on that issue. I think that is about all I had, other than I hope you all got the invite to January 24th post-holiday party, I think we're calling it, and in Murphy's, and we're hoping for a good turnout from staff, and we'd love to see you all there.
Do you have a date, projection for the retreat, or have you?
No, I want to coordinate with you on that, but we'll talk about that. Oh, I did want to just, I've talked to the board members about, we will be scheduling a board meeting a special board meeting on the afternoon of the 17th to discuss the role of general counsel at CCWD. So, yeah, we'll get that agenda out.
Is that set for, you have a time now?
We still need to confirm a time. It'll be that afternoon, but I think we had talked about 2 o'clock. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's it. Unless there's any other questions. Well, I guess one other thing I should mention, there has been a lot of activity over the last few weeks coordinating with MIA on Army Corps funding, and Director Davidson and Director Thomas were supporting that effort to just make a last push to encourage the Army Corps to include our Section 219 project request into their work plan. We're anticipating that work plan to be submitted or completed at least by the 15th of this month. And we're really hoping that project is in there. If it's in there, it still has to get through the OMB and is still subject to final approval. That's not the last step, but that's the critical first step. If we're not in the work plan, then it's, then we're not going to be considered. So we've been in close contact with Congressman McClintock's office on that, and we expect him to make a personal call this week to the Assistant Secretary of the Army to ask for support for that project. And then in addition to that, I was talking to Mia this morning about hopefully that project gets funded, but then also our secondary ask of increasing the funding request or the funding authorization in this current WRDA bill up to $13 million for additional wastewater system improvements. So we're trying to push both of those things forward, and it's sort of we're close to the, not necessarily finish line, but we're close to a critical milestone. So we've been putting a lot of effort into that.
Good to hear.
Okay. Board reports?
I'm good. That's my report, I'm good.
Yeah.
Nothing to report.
Mountain Counties has a meeting this coming Friday. It's our first meeting of the year. There's a lot going on in Mountain Counties. John Kingsbury, our executive director, has been executive director for 10 years plus, is transitioning, is what he's calling it right now, and he's just trying to figure out what it's gonna look like. This is our first real board meeting where where we're gonna be discussing it and what it's gonna look like.
Where's it at?
It's gonna be in Jackson. We move our meetings around. This is in a different place every other month. It's gonna be, I think right now it's at 810 Main Street. It's at the chamber, the Board of Supervisors chambers is where it'll be in Jackson. 810 Court Street, pretty sure. And that'll be on Friday, this coming Friday at 9 a.m. That'll be the main topic. Also, do we need to agendize the naming the Bummerville Reservoir? Is that something that is that a board action, or do we need to keep seeing? We had Damon hasn't got the memo that it's not the regulating reservoir anymore, or maybe it's still the regulating reservoir and we need to do make a formal action. I'm not quite sure.
Should we get it? Let's get a resolution on the next agenda. Put
Okay,
this to
future
rest.
agenda. Okay, that's all I got.
Okay, something, within the last month, isn't this funny that I'm still receiving thanks from my ratepayers for the discount that CCWD. Have you guys been hearing or have you heard anything? It was just so funny. You know, they're thanking me for CCWD offering them
The
a
rate assistance.
discount. So I thought that was great. They still appreciate us.
You anyway.
Okay, is there anything else?
Well, I do
No?
have one little comment from Michael. So, you know how I always talk about customer service never answers the phone? So when I called your extension, it went to a live voice for an answering service. So my question is that what you guys did for district-wide, or is it only on extensions like, you know, yours, Peter's, Damon's?
I'm not sure how that happened, honestly. That's the
Yeah,
first.
I just
That's the
went-
first
I
one
went,
of those
"Hello."
messages. Yeah.
I was surprised. It was like,
Oh,
it was a
yeah.
live voice, and,
That would be a lunch hour thing,
Yeah.
customer service lunch hour.
yeah, and so that does it for the.
Does it do it to my
district-wide.
phone too?
I don't know how that happened.
That's the first one of those messages I've received. I was surprised by
Oh,
that.
really? Yeah, because I did leave a message.
So you know when to call, Cindy.
Yeah, but no, I'd still rather prefer to talk to somebody. Anyhow, I know that, I guess Joel had made some changes based on my little complaints, and I was wondering if that was it. At least it goes to a live voice instead of that stupid, you know. push
No,
this
we
button, push
changed,
this button.
yeah, no, we changed the phone tree. We changed, I believe we were working on, I'm not sure what the status of that is, changing, you don't have to do the, I'm still here
Yeah.
thing. I can't remember,
Well, it
that
was
was a couple
just-
months ago, so, but yes, we did make some improvements on
I haven't
that.
called for a while, so I'll just have to call, I guess.
We have some closed session still,
Yep,
don't we?
okay, any future agenda items? None?
Bummerville Reservoir.
Oh, Bummerville.
Bummerville Reservoir.
Okay, Bummerville. Okay, next board meetings, Wednesday, January 22nd, 9 AM, regular board. Wednesday, February the 12th, 9 AM, regular board. So now we're ready for closed session, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation. 9A, and then 9B, we go for government code, agency negotiators, general manager, Stacy Lawler, regarding negotiations with employee organization SEIU. Management.
Small room or something?
Okay, adjourn to closed session.
Small room.